This is episode 78 of Summoning Insight, and I'm your usual host, Thorin, all that stuff. I wonder if there could really be anyone watching the show at this point in time, Monty. I don't say this just as a mad narcissist. I realise that is very remit as a member of the show. I'm allowed to be a mad narcissist, but is there really anyone watching the show at this point in time who's like, first of all, what is this show? And someone better explain it very quickly or I'm tuned out. And secondly, who is that guy talking now? Tell me now, who is he? If I do not have an official introduction, the show is over. Because the problem is as well, this is probably why I am a mad narcissist. If there was anyone like that, then I'm sort of like, just go then. I'm trying to play it cool, you know. I'm just like, well, just go then. The show's not for you. Summoning Insight episode 78 is definitely not for you. Even though I can't know what it has right now, but I can already tell you at some point a ridiculous line that's absurd and has no context is going to be uttered, then put as the sort of subtitle to this episode that I already know means you can't tune out. You have to know where that happens, and you have to watch it as a result, because there's no way it's going to have anything to do with like the main topic. So
we also live in a glorious world where even your biggest haters, the people who loathe you and who are so obsessed with shitting all over you on social media, will in fact watch the episode with go over it with a fine-tooth comb, find the one thing they don't like, and then link it everywhere, thereby generating us more views. So it actually works in our favor.
I think probably my favourite, though, is the people who I'll give credit to. I actually believe some of them when they say they don't watch the show, but what they do want is they'll be in a thread, like, you know, the kind of thread that someone who doesn't watch my content would be in, like a Thorin's Thoughts thread or Summoning Insight thread. And what they'll do is they'll start off with some sort of provocative comment like, these guys just never stop shitting on the West. Like, they never stop talking about, I mean, insert team. I mean, it could be any team pretty much. Apparently every fan base has nutters, except only the one that ever actually seems to produce nutters. And whatever fan base that might be, again, make up your own minds. Live in whatever fantasy you need to. That fan base will say something like, you know, and the way they always just spend the whole show talking about that team that is like called team something, could be Dignitas, could be anything at this point in time. So the way they just only talk about that and just hate them is bullshit. And then someone will reply like, well, I mean, they didn't really do that in this episode. And then what's great is they'll always make a comment like, I stopped watching about 50 episodes ago, and you'll be like, why are you still, you're in every thread? What is this? Like, here's the thing, I don't need to tell you this, Monty, but I don't watch soap operas, right? And even though I do think they're pretty shit, and if someone ever had like a full discussion with me, I would probably be like, I think that's pretty shit actually, mate. Like, I wouldn't waste my time. You'd never catch me on like the website for that soap opera, just like latest episode. You guys still watching this, are you? You know, it's like incredibly formulaic and full of bullshit, aren't you? Well, I mean, this episode is pretty good though. I kind of like the arc. Don't watch it myself. Just like, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Who the fuck is that guy? Full Conor McGregor there. Got the memes in there. Okay. So, as usual, extended intro. This time, haven't even got past my own name. I started at my own name, went on a tangent immediately. So, kind of a fitting theme for this show. So I'm Thorin, usual host, blah, 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 all that stuff. Apparently made my whole career just on shitting on one team in one esports game that actually so far has counted for quite a small percentage of my career, including not even my main focus right now, which is also simultaneously the thing they criticise me for because I don't do content in that game. But remember, that's all that I do is that one team. Again, Team X. Could be Dignitas, we'll never know. Dignitas, are you out there? Is it you? Odie, I thought we squashed the beef, man. Why the fans still coming? Why are they so... I mean, ironically, the logo of Team Dignitas is an alien, and yet their fans seem less like fucking aliens than team which could be Dignitas. That's going to be the new alias for them on the show. Okay, don't refer to them by name if you're going to diss them, Monty. Call them Team, insert could be Dignitas here.
Just as a sidebar, my favorite thing about Dignitas is that if you Google Dignitas, Team Dignitas is not the first thing that comes up.
Isn't it?
It's an assisted suicide clinic in Switzerland.
Yep, it's good.
Yep. We were actually specifically told to call them Team Dignitas. And we were like, why? And we just called them Dignitas for so long.
Sick,
and we finally did that, and we were like, yeah, okay, Dignitas.
Especially as that is like one of those moments, right, where you think that life can't be real. Because at that point in time, right, he did come up with the name a long time before they had a history of always failing everyone, every season, and in some epic way. So it's like, for that to actually be real, and then somehow live up to a theme that exists out there, is some sort of mad, like, Joycean note, where, like, You know, people always try to claim now, Monty, that you can go back in James Joyce and find like some sort of intimations to the nuclear bomb going off, even though it was like written before all that shit happened, right? Like they always try to find something, cram it, and you're like, you're working a bit hard there. This is better than any of those Joycean illusions, Monty. If this was like an annotated like note set for fucking life, I'd be like, that's incredible. There's no way that could accidentally have been slipped in there. He obviously intended the whole thing to be some sort of joke to bring attention to the fact that people who want to kill themselves can in fact go to this area in, I think, Holland or something and just do it.
It's in Switzerland.
Okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like the team was like an advertisement. Like, you know, like Sinn Féin was like the political body of IRA. It's almost like some sort of mad scenario like that. Like, so anyway, well, Monty's the usual co-host.
At least they actually provide solutions to the problems that their team creates.
Ironically, Dignitas provides no solutions to that scenario. I think probably my favourite thing of all, Monty, is the fact that somehow, of all the people to escape Dignitas, here's the thing: Shifter actually ended up being a pretty good player. Zion Spartan went and looked like he was going to be the one who escaped it, Money. He looked like he was the one doing the best. Made the MSI final, won LCS. It's actually looking like the guy who's escaped it all is Core JJ switching to support role in a Korean team and starting over. Somehow he's the one who got out of that motherfucker. How did that happen?
Hey, Gamsu at least is doing well in Overwatch.
In Overwatch, yeah. But we saw League of Legends end, Money. I'm not sure he basically did commit fucking seppuku or whatever in League of Legends because everyone in fucking Fnatic was like, you are shit. He's like, well, no, I'm trying my best at that. The jungler doesn't always have that. You actually are terrible. And he had to just leave League of Legends disgraced. Like, I am sorry to my fans and family. Almost like a TSM member or something. But without the epic Worlds breakdown. So at this point in the show, Monty, we've got a Riot caster here. He's already thinking...
We almost got through the introduction.
He's already thinking this many sidebars, including one specifically tying beloved franchise Team Dignitas, one of the original 8 NA LCS franchises, to suicide, including a punchline that they in fact were just an elaborate prank to bring attention to the fact that viewers of the LCS could kill themselves in Switzerland, apparently. So, hello, Zirene. Welcome to Summoning Insight. Tread carefully, my friend. Tread carefully.
Sorry.
So we will actually talk mainly about League of Legends on this episode because, believe it or not a lot of people know this, but much like with interviews, I actually consider it when you work on something like a piece of content together. Like, it's not like we're doing like the Frost Nixon tips here. This is like we are all a team working towards the same end goal, which is producing like a quality product that everyone in theory can put their name alongside. And we're not trying to gotcha anyone. So this will obviously mainly be analysis of that game, League of Legends. Basically, the stuff that Monty doesn't get hired to do at Riot events anymore. We're going to try and sort of recreate that now. So Zyrene's passed me a few notes on good jokes I can set him up for. I've got a few like crazy allusions to things, and like they can't see it right now, but I've actually got my hair shaved into a mohawk, and and I've become a lot more likable. You know what? My teeth, they gleam. I'm going to show them a lot more. I'm not just going to smirk. I'm going to smile broadly, and let's start the show. So I know technically we did start the show like 10 minutes ago, but this is the real start now.
Now you've already got the click.
Yeah. This is exactly. It's too late now, right? It's just end the show. That was it. So. Okay, we haven't discussed anything that happened at Worlds, Monty. All of the group stages happened. I've got a question for you at the outset, Monty, because this is something I'm actually genuinely interested to know. Because I have this problem myself in League of Legends. Like, in general, I'm pretty good because I come from other games, and also I spend a lot of time in other games, at kind of not getting too caught up in the way people, like the group, think of League of Legends, in as much as, like, I have been referencing like every LCS season. Oh, maybe they could do rules this way, or maybe you could tweak it this way. Or do you know in another esport this exists? But even I, every now and then, will sort of get pulled into the lucid dream, Monty, and be like, shit, wait, this is just a dream. Fuck yeah, I don't even have to obey the laws of this dream. That even happens to me, Monty. So there is a part of me that has to just come out of this a second and go, wait a minute. It feels like half the tournament or more has already been done, but those were just 4-team groups. Like, you know, in other games, this part of the tournament is like the shortest part of the whole tournament. But this part is like to play a 14 group stage in the World Championship League of Legends is very unique, actually. It takes quite a long time. Like, they have that format where first week is you play like a game separated by days and you each take a turn. And then the second set, whatever you call it, second round round is where you play all of them in one day. What do you actually
have to
think?
do it that way. Otherwise, you'd end up with all the tiebreakers in one day in week 2. So that would be crazy if there were a million tiebreakers, because it could last like another 8 hours. You never know.
Because here's the thing, I don't really like the idea that the group stage takes so long. Like, that's not something I'm a fan of. But I actually do like, I have to say this, I've said this in a video somewhere. I do like the system that they use for the round robin, though, where they do the 2 different aspects of round robin.
Oh, yeah, it's cool.
Because I think they kind of like reward a different thing, you know. Like, obviously, the first one's like OGN style preparation, where you have the time to literally plan for the opponent. But the second one's more just like, what hot form are you in that day? So to me, in a weird way, the second one's almost actually what the Westerners should have a better chance in. Because this reminds me of what it used to be like in StarCraft 2. The reason why no Korean... no Westerner ever won like GSL is because you always had like prep time in GSL, right? So no matter how good you were, the Korean and his coaches would just go to town and they'd figure out, you know, somewhat one of them's going to beat you eventually. Whereas actually, if you had a tournament that was over 3 days, people like Stefano did win these tournaments against Koreans. Because the idea was
he literally just won Kespa Cup in a 3-day tournament.
Yeah, but that's exactly. So even though that was a Korean one, it also happened to have the format that the Westerners were suited to. I actually think in general it's just a good format because it gives you a bit of both. Okay, so what do you think in general about that the group stage takes so long? What are your thoughts on that? Not a positive or negative, by the way, just a straight up question. What do you think? It's quite a unique thing about League, right?
I like it. I don't have an issue with it. I think that when you have the 2 days for group stage, you have a chance to... I also like it because when you separate the meetings of the teams, you have the initial thoughts where everybody's been dark. You know, everybody has been sort of... Nobody knows what each other's strategies are because you've been scrimming privately. There haven't been any competitions in the last few weeks. So you kind of have to go on advanced research. And then you can take the actual current form of the team into consideration for your preparation to face that team again in the next week. So I think that's also an interesting way to do things. And it rewards both, you know, extensive pre-planning before the tournament as well as a shorter adaptation over the course of the next week. So I think it's a good format. I like it.
What do you think, Zirene? I mean, the way this is scheduled, obviously, it was the same last year. It does, like, obviously make the second one more exciting because it's all going to be on one day. It's the idea, like, your entire tournament is going to be decided on that one day. But you kind of have, like, the intimations of what could happen when you played them over the more extended thing. What do you think about that?
I really like the week 2. I'm not 100% on the week 1 with everybody kind of scattered out throughout the days. Because, like, I think it tests 2 different things, and then you move on to best of 5. So it's like testing 3 different types of skills.
Yeah.
And, like, the rest of the tournament doesn't have anything to do with what it was like in the first week. So it's like, why are we testing their ability to play a single game on a day, have a day off, and then, like, play another one and play 1 game a day, where it's supposed to be, like, endurance and being able to adapt between games and sets. So I feel like I wouldn't mind if it was the same way in week 2 or same way in week 1 as it was in week 2, and we just had it like that, because it just seems like it changes, and I don't know why.
I mean, ideally, now that all of the leagues are best of 2 or best of 3, what I would like to see is double round robin and best of 2 or best of 3 formats instead. And obviously that creates problems, but I think that in terms of scheduling, but you'd have to go to 2 streams at that point in time. But Riot has shown now that they're willing with NA LCS to go to a double stream model, and they're also showing that they want to put out 2 streams anyway because they were offering all the matchup streams and everything. They had enough casters to cover that. So yeah, it kind of sucks that maybe not every team gets its chance on stage, but it doesn't really matter at, you know, for example, CSGO majors or the international for Dota, where you do have not on stage time in the group stages, and then you get into the big stage time in quarterfinals. The other thing that I think they could do, which would be interesting for an alternative format, is to split the teams into 2 groups instead of 4, and use 8-team groups and double round robin best of 1 in the 8-team groups, which obviously creates more games. Again, you'd have to go to 2 streams, but that means so every team plays more than 6 games in order to determine their placement, and that way you can get... I also think you can probably get better, maybe slightly better brackets out of that as well. Because one thing I really don't like, and I don't even understand, is why in the bracket draw system that they have to move beyond the groups, why is it that... I understand, obviously, you don't want to have teams that were in the same group hit each other in quarterfinals.
Well, why can't
but
they
I don't
play
understand
in the semis?
Why can't they play in the semis? Like, I don't get that at all. That's the only time I've ever seen that rule in any tournament ever.
Yeah, I think the thought process behind it is if you have the 2 best teams in the entire tournament in the same group, they can't meet again until the finals. But I personally don't agree with that. I don't know why they can't meet in the semis. I mean, you could have a really damn good semis. I mean, we've had it in the past, and it hasn't been a big problem. Like when Samsung White played Samsung Blue, it's like, well, then they move on, and then they play, was it Royal in the finals? Yeah. It's like, all right. I don't see why it's a big problem, because you're going to end up with something kind of similar this year, where like some of the best teams are going to meet each other in the semis on the left side of the bracket, and then whoever wins the right side, it's like, you made it to the finals, congratulations. And the finals already kind of happened in the semis.
Hopefully that's not true. We can discuss that. I think that there is merit to Samsung's current form that we can talk about. And Samsung is like an overwhelming favorite to make the finals now, because that side of the bracket is so weak. And we could still have a good finals because Samsung actually has been playing quite well. But like in any case, when you say the thought process was, well, what happens if two teams in the same group are the strongest teams in the tournament? Due to circuit points and seeding, it is incredibly unlikely that the two best teams are going to be in the same group. It's so unlikely.
Well, what if you have the number 1 and number 2 Korean team, then they have split apart? It's like, yeah, we've done so many different things where we have first seeds, and then we make it so that two teams from the same region can't be in there. So,
exactly. So I think that's just really unlikely.
I agree. I don't
get that. Obviously, it's not foolproof to get a better bracket draw, but I do think we could have avoided the absolutely horrendous bracket that we have right now. Obviously, this bracket would still have been technically possible without that rule in place, but this is basically the worst bracket draw that could have happened. It is hard to come up with a worse bracket for the playoffs, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's also really interesting as well, because as soon as you draw the first two, you actually know within a 50% chance of what everything else is. Because you know the other two have to be on the other side, and then you know the two teams that have to be on either side of the bracket in the seed twos. It's just who draws who, right? Yeah. It's like, as soon as we had those two teams seeded in, SKT and Rox, it was like, okay, well, we know that EDG and RNG have to be on that side of the bracket.
Well, I mean, you say but Jet didn't know,
to be fair, his monitor went out and he got like some bad information as well. So it was just like,
I'm joking. It's a confusing system.
Monty,
I don't blame him at all.
You have to realize, I'm actually sad that Freak did that tweet where he explained that if RNG won the game, like they'd already qualified and TSM wouldn't make it. Because I really hoped, I was on my hands and knees, please, for one time, if they could just forget to mention this on the broadcast. Listen, there's a lot of people watching this broadcast right now. They rely on this service to get their information. Please don't say it. Because I just wanted that moment, Monty, where I just go to Twitter and it's like, all right, we're in with a shot now, tiebreaker time. I was praying for that so much. That's all I wanted in life, Monty. That's all. I mean, that did still kind of happen. And also, by the way, you'll very rarely see this happen on the show, but it's going to happen, okay? In no way is it Freak's fault that this is not a tiebreaker. He was literally the messenger. You got out a fucking machine gun and just blew him away. And he was literally behind, please, I'm just a messenger. I didn't even decide this. Get that. Come on. Wow. Freak isn't the commissioner of the league, It's not like they made it sound like he made that up on the spot or something. Like, you know what? Fuck it for this game.
He was trying to just be informative about a rule in a tournament, and the responses were absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Oh, no, the irony is, Monty.
I tweeted Freak. I was like, I have never seen so many idiotic responses to someone stating something factual about esports.
No, here's the thing, Monty. The irony is, he literally was helping them.
Being communists.
He was literally helping them not get their hearts destroyed in the way I wanted them to get their hearts destroyed. If he was saving some of them from me, essentially, I would have had most of them at that Dignitas clinic, mate. And I'm not talking about a thing on how to become a really sick player in a league with an alien for an avatar. So wait, by the way, just as a side note, this has nothing to do with the rest of the show. I just want to say this fact in case anyone doesn't know this. Odie actually has that shit fucking Dignitas logo tattooed on his body. Definitely don't pay for an upgrade for that. I can't believe that's really he does as well. He has that actually tattooed on his body, mate.
The most confusing thing is that Dignitas is a Latin term for honor, and I don't understand what that has to do with that alien. Why can't it just be like a legionnaire or some Roman theme, right? Weird.
Yeah. Plus, that alien looks a little bit like Kennen. Maybe they could do a theme skin, eh? And then they could make revenue sharing, give money to Dignitas.
Hey, they say they're going to do that now.
Yeah.
So we'll see if it happens.
Yeah. we're veering into dangerous territory there again, Mike. Back to the games of League of Legends. So in the games of League of Legends, let's start off with Group A, okay? Because obviously that's the one where we started out, like I said, in the format with you actually played opponents that you knew you were prepared for. So here's the funny thing, Zirene. In theory, I mean, I realise they are still actually playing the first official games on the first week in this sense, but the actual first week should be the one that has the least upsets, because the difference is, on the one where you play everyone on one day, if someone brings something completely crazy out, or they're just in some insane level of form, you can't really just like instantly stop that and like make yourself an hour later play really super sick. So it's actually pretty insane when you think about it that Albus Nox got 2 of their upsets on the first week, where they beat, obviously they lost the first game of Rocks, and then they beat CLG and they beat G2. We know now that they actually ended up tied for first in the group and all that jazz before the tiebreaker. What is your make on Albus Nox coming in? Like, here's the thing: were you really someone who thought they had any chance, realistically?
Absolutely not. No.
Was there any kind of hint or
so.
something you could take, and that was like a precursor to this, or something ominous?
I mean, the fact that they had Europe in their group, that's the only thing. Like, seriously, like G2 collapsing, that was like kind of something that could happen. But I know nobody ever thought that Albus Nox was really going to make it through. Like, there's fucking 6 pick'ems that are right still out of like 1.8 million. Come on.
To be fair, though, Zirene,
insane.
like, there was a lot more pick'ems before TSM got rocked out of that group. Like, even Albus Nox coming first was predicted more than TSM not getting out of that group. Fucking hell, that's rich. I can't handle it. That's like, it's like I'm trying to eat my 15th, like, truffle made in Switzerland, ironically, and like, oh, it's just too much chocolate, Monty. It's so delicious. Oh, it's like, anyway, so here's the question then, Monty, is Albus Nox did this insane run, beat Rocks Tigers, obviously beat CLG, beat everyone in the group actually at different times. How much of it was them actually being a really good team?
I think they actually were impressive in terms of their play, and I do think that at least some of the matches that they had may have been, especially like people underestimating them, particularly their first game against the Rocks Tigers when they were doing all kinds of absolutely stupid like jungle invades and taking really dumb skirmishes and digging themselves into a giant hole. But to their credit, also Albus Nox did show that they could pretty cleanly close out games once they got advantages against teams like CLG and G2. So they did actually have a stronger sense of macro when they were ahead than I anticipated. And in fact, way better than G2's macro, and in my opinion, better macro than teams in other groups. That's one of the things. I don't think they're going to beat H2K, but I was more impressed with Albus Nox's late game decision making than I was with H2K's.
Is it?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think that the Albus Nox Rocks matchup, where like Peanut invaded and he got himself killed against Stayhouse, like complete disrespect. Like Albus Nox, they actually should have won that game. Like they just screwed up a bottom dive, and that's it. But I totally think that they could have actually left the group in even better shape. It's crazy to think about.
The most ridiculous thing about like the fact that they did so well, Monty, is that obviously their team is made up of players from Ukraine, Russia, etc. And we did have that joke on the last episode of Summoning Insight, which was like, if I had control, I would kick all the Albus Nox players, and it would just be Moscow 5 turns up, right? And the idea my joke was, to have any chance against people like Rocks Tigers, you don't want someone to play the meta, right? You want them to just come in there like, what are you on about? This is sick and solo queue, like fucking Rylai's Warwick top lane. Like, I'll do whatever the fuck I want. Because in a mad way, that's actually one of the few things that can get through a Korean's mind. Because if you remember that interview I did with Flame, right? When Flame's talking about Darien, if you talk to any Korean top laner who played Darien, they actually think he's like way better than any Westerner does. Not, by the way, because they've got some super insight, because they only know the rare times they played him in competition, and so they really think he was some sort of mad, innovative genius, right? They don't understand he didn't give a fuck, and he didn't play it. He himself didn't know the meta. He didn't play League of Legends. Like, he actually didn't give a fuck. So that's the genius of it, because they've never played anyone like that. They've always played someone trying to be a slightly worse version of them, which means they're in their comfort zone. They still to this day, it's like I could hear Flame trying to unravel it. Like, I don't understand, because you see, when he actually went back, the first item he bought was like a giant's belt even though he was like slightly ahead on the stuff. Because, obviously at the time you'd like build like a fucking damage item, like they couldn't comprehend like what is he, how has he figured out League of Legends, and whether I and all my professional coaches can't figure it out. And so what's mad is it's like them trying to figure that out is, I mean, the best example ever, Monty, is the only time anyone ever did get tilted who was Korean was where Imp literally was just like, you know what? Hands up, maybe I just don't know how to play the role of AD carry. This Genja guy knows what he's doing with this Trinity Force cog. Well, I'll give it a go. I mean, that's the new meta now. And then he himself was like, oh no, this makes no sense. I'm fucked, and I lose the game. Brilliant. So like that's like the one moment anyone did just crack a Korean's mentality completely.
By the way, this was like before the changes to Kog'Maw and Trinity Force 2, when it actually was not a good build.
It wasn't.
At the time.
But that's the genius. It's like he actually lured him into thinking this could work. Like it couldn't. If he doesn't, that they won because they're Moscow 5 basically. So here's the question, Monty. So my joke about that, etc. In a mad way, that is sort of part of what made them very good, right? Like no one had really played them because apparently people didn't scrim them. Then they were doing shit like brand support, but for real, not as a troll.
Was super legit. In fact, I would not be surprised if for quarterfinals other teams played brand support. Because when I was watching it, I was sitting there thinking, if you're going to play Zyra and you want a high damage AP support, well, just play Brand too. And since I mean, he's so good at finishing off those team fights. It was really amazing to me to see how he played it. Played it really well. And like I said, I think that may become a pocket pick for some other teams as well.
I think one of the coolest things about it too is it makes it so that junglers are really fucking scared to invade you. I was doing one of the Fog of War streams, the ult stream in week 1, and I noticed it was the G2 versus Albus Nox matchup. In G2, like they're trying to play things by the book. It's like pressure first, then get the vision. And Albus Nox would always have pressure on them because they had kill with the brand. But also, they were waiting to see Stejos. Like, typically it's like, oh, we saw jungler topside, go invade bottom side, put some vision because he can't possibly be there. Stejos like doesn't show on any fucking wards, so they don't know where he is, so they never actually take the risk to get the vision. So Albus Nox don't play it by the same book as everybody else, and that's actually really interesting because like a Korean will like sweep a bush and be like, oh, he can't possibly know that I'm in here, and Albus Nox is just like fucking gonna check that bush anyway, and it's like, it's fucking crazy. Why would he do that? And they do that stuff and they get away with it, and it actually works.
I mean, that's one of the things that was interesting, because one thing that did remind me of Moscow 5 with this team is that if you notice, they had like really good follow-up and they were super decisive. Now, in a mad way, that's actually, by the way, what we've literally unraveled using this show and interviews over the years about Moscow 5. It's not that they knew the strategy of exactly what to do. They hadn't figured out all the timings. Like, listen, remember, we're like, like synchronized swimmers. I go in first, you follow after, he comes like, no, they actually really just were like, we're going in, we're just going in then, like, no matter what. It's like the same thing that reminds me of, this worked for Royal Club at the Season 4 Worlds, where we saw the communication when they were just pinging. They didn't actually have any communication, Monty. They would just ping on a spot, and everyone would almost like flash onto that spot and unleash all abilities. So, in a mad way, that is, in some sense, incredibly good coordination, because you don't need any timing or any nuance, like, go slowly, hold. You just rush in like barbarians and just do damage. So here's the question, though. The problem with this group, despite all the great things they did, beating Rox Tigers, like you said, having a pretty close game against them in some senses the first time they met, despite all of that, unfortunately, I feel like if Albus Nox now just gets wrecked, people will retcon the group and just go, oh, well, what happened was G2 were just mad chokers and failures, and even worse, like CLG, no one expected them to get out anyway, like they don't have good enough play. That's like the way people will retcon the group, so in a way they'll take away from Albus Nox's accomplishment. How do you weigh up their actual accomplishment in this group? Because there is some grain of truth to some of those things about CLG and G2, right?
Oh yeah, I mean there is obviously G2. I think after week 1 they just totally tilted because even in week 2, yeah, they managed to pick up their one victory over Albus Nox, but in spite of that, we've had a lot of nominees on Twitter for the Dade Monte Award. Yeah. And some people were suggesting Trick, which was weird to me because I think Trick was the only reason why they were in some of the games in the first week of competition. And he certainly was not up to his normal form, but I think you really have to point more towards like Sven and probably particularly Mithy as being a hyped up player who seriously underperformed because he just didn't show up basically at all. I think that certainly G2 failed to deliver in any way, shape, or form. And CLG did, I suppose, kind of how I expected. 3-3, I maybe would have pegged them at 2-4 if you had asked me before the tournament, but 3-3, probably about what you would expect right there. But I think that it doesn't really take away from Albus Nox's success, because we do see good League of Legends coming out of them, and they do. It's not like they accidentally get a lead and don't know how to close a game. Like, they have a strong sense of how to play when they're ahead, and they can execute on that, and they look coordinated. So I think they're legitimately a pretty good team.
Okay, who on the team though, and like in terms of actual players, if you have to predict for the rest of the tournament or going forwards in history, like what's good is every time you get a team that like starts out as an upset team and then becomes legit, there's nearly always like one or two players where their future is like, go to a better team or become established as great players. Who would you put the mantle on right now? Who should we look to in the future? Because obviously not everyone in this team is going to be super sick and have an amazing career from here on out in League of Legends. Who's the candidates to be really good? I mean, just to give you a reference point, believe it or not, in one of the early episodes of Summoning Insight, I think it was like episode 4 or something, we did a breakdown of Roccat, who was the new hot team in spring of 2014 in season 4. And when we did this particular segment of the show, and we had to pick out who are the actual legit players here, believe it or not, Monty, I don't often get them right, but I did pick out Jankos and Vander as the two from that team that I thought would be legit going forwards. I didn't pick any of the carries. I did not pick, what the fuck even was the name of that mid laner on that team? What was the name of that guy who went top laner, went teleport afterwards, and had like a million champions mid lane and played Kale? Why am I blanking on this name? What was his name? The guy from Roccat.
I'm trying to remember too.
I mean, I could look it up. Let me think. Does anyone remember the name of him? Let me see. Mid lane, Roccat, season 4, Kale.
It's gonna sound so familiar too when it happens.
What was his name? Yeah. Because the problem is he hasn't played in like over a year. He was the top lane for Roccat in season 5 as well. The one that they changed to. Let me look this up. I don't even know why it's that relevant, but I just need to know it now, Monty. I must know it. Does anyone remember the name? Let's have a look.
Negative.
Let's see. Sad thing was, this is the guy who... The reason why I'm making the point why I want to look it up is because the difference is, at the time... Actually, Jankos did get a little bit hype, but at the time, no one mentioned Vander, actually, because at the time, he was just like a triple-A Thresh, like a million people who were like the hot topic.
Overpow?
Yes, Overpow, that's right. But here's the thing, if you remember, Overpow was the one who got all the hype at the time, because like I said, he played Kale in that series against Nip, and also he was the guy who did have that mad thing where, because he was bringing out a new champion every week in LCS, it looked like, oh my god, how deep's this champion pool? And it actually turned out, just a good example of how analysis in time corrects itself, it actually turned out it was the opposite. It's that he didn't have any super strong picks, he didn't have any meta picks, he was just doing weird picks all the time, and he sort of could make them work. And so, in the end, though, it turned out Jankos and Vander were the legit ones. Who would you pick now? Who would the obvious candidates be, either of you, on this team? Who do you think's legit going forwards?
I think Liquid and Stayhouse are pretty legitimate. Those are the two guys that I would say. So another support jungle combination like on Roccat. But those have been the guys I've been most intrigued by. I think that Stayhouse has some really interesting, like, clever pathing. I saw that especially in the Rocks Tigers games. Like, he will hide in places and ambush you in really weird ways that I think catch people off guard. And I think Liquid has the features of a playmaking support. His first game on Bard was really bad, but the rest of his Bard games were quite good.
No, I agree. I think Stayhouse and Lecrit. I don't think Smurf at all. I think Kira has the possibility. And then Miracle's really strange because he's not really good in lane, and Lecrit kind of carries him. But then at like the 40-minute mark, it's like he activates his scripts for that one team fight. And then he's just like a Lucian god in that one fight. And then he just goes off and the game's over.
Yeah, his kiting on that Lucian really did help them win the game against the Rocks Tigers. Because if he had died right there, probably Rocks wins. I mean, Rocks had no business even being in that game in the first place. But
Smurf did like nothing on Poppy forever, and then just that one fight too. That's it.
Yeah, of course I was praising their macro, but they actually were pretty shit at closing out that game and got a lot of objectives stolen. But it's also like I'm not comparing them to late game Korean macro, which is obviously superior to basically every other. No, not even basically two.
Plus, you know what, Monty? So. No matter how much, like, everything's going perfectly, you're having the time of your life, I feel like a little bit of nerves could set in when you're up against, like, probably the best team in the whole world, and everyone's like, you've got the game in the bag, lads. Like, I feel like that's where you could be forgiven the odd mistake, as it were, Like, that. It's fair enough if you make a few errors there at that point in time.
Also, when you get the Baron stolen and stuff like that, too, it can be difficult to sort of recenter yourself and figure out how you're going to win the game.
Well, I also think like Albus Nox had an edge over everybody in the group by not giving a fuck. Like I don't think it can actually be overstated how important that is, because G2 is like #1 European seed. It's like, oh, big hopes for these guys. CLG, they actually went the furthest that any North America team has gone in a Riot tournament. And then Rox Tigers, like #1 in Korea. It's like everybody has large expectations. You start losing that game, there's tons of pressure, and the wild card is just like, fuck you, comes on in. It's like, we played WoW. That's it. Like, I think that Albus Nox Luna actually got a lot of power from that.
Monty, when we had this scenario where you said, like, for a record, okay, 3-3, that's not like unfair for CLG. That's obviously because the normal record you'd expect is they win the 2 wildcard games and then maybe they can steal a game off G2. That would actually be a reasonable expectation, right? But they did get their 3-3 by beating Rox Tigers, Monty. CLG, Hui, beat Rox Tigers. Come on, Monty.
I don't know why they didn't ban Aurelion Sol.
Listen.
But, by the way, I want to go back.
Pretty cheesy.
It was pretty cheesy, but it was also very clever, and that's one of the things. Remember when we were talking to Crepo and Deficio, and I said that CLG has had in the past like a lot of very interesting and very clever level 1s, and this is one of those times where they really got away with a very nice gank on the bottom lane, and there's no way you expect that's going to happen, but They actually do have very good early game planning, and I think a lot of that is Zix, their coach, who is smart about how he sets that kind of stuff up.
I don't think
he's smart about how he sets those up. Sometimes his drafts, like that last game, his drafts, putting Huhi on Karma and then like the double support item build, like I thought those were actually awful.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by the West's draft in general. I also was not a fan of TSM's draft on the last day either. Okay. Like their compositions didn't really make any sense. So.
Is it too far with CLG to just give them that like narrative? Because it seems like the history at the moment that they are just like the new version of fucking old Cloud9, where it's like mid laner is always criticized, but somehow finds a way to sort of do his job, and they're super plucky. They're going to come back into a game and they're going to win an upset game that you don't expect to, and they're going to use their brains, not their brawn, all that jazz. Is there anything to that?
I think there is something. They certainly do not win based off of individual strength at this point in time, right? They win off of having very good knowledge, probably the best knowledge of any team in the West, of their own strengths and weaknesses, and they play around that. Does that make them very vulnerable, particularly in bans? Yes. Yes, it does. Like, they use Aurelion Sol and Caitlyn like crutches, and they have been ever since MSI. And I'm surprised that more teams didn't pick up on that, given that was very clearly, I think, demonstrated by SK Telecom at MSI. They let them have these tools again. And with those tools, they know how to use them, right? With specific compositions, CLG is very good at playing out the game. But if you get them off those compositions, they just don't have very deep champion pools. They can only play a few things at, I would say, a world-class level. And once they depart from that, it falls apart pretty fast.
Do you think it's possible? This is just a theory, okay? Do you think it's possible because Aurelion Sol was disabled at some point in the past, that when people researched this team, they just didn't even notice that, and they just watched the most recent games and they were like, why would he play this champion? And they somehow didn't know the one champion that guy actually can play to some sort of mad level.
He was one of the first people to bring it out, even at MSI. He's kind of been the Aurelion Sol guy.
I mean, maybe they did. I can't tell what's in other people's brains, but
it's a possibility.
Do you think it was just a cocky, they purposely let it through, not giving a fuck, and they thought they could just deal with it?
Rox does have a history of doing things like that. Okay. Possibly.
As we go on, I actually have a champion-related question, which is one thing that was a trend that we've noticed, just even by win rate, is that people have picked Ezreal quite a lot. It's been picked 24 times, and it has lost 16 games. And the only one I can think of off the top of my head that was a really good Ezreal game was the Uzi one, where he went ham, and that's about it. Everyone else who picks it, in general, loses the game. And we saw
he went ham. He went ham a couple times, and Bang and Prey are both good Ezreal players as well.
Bang lost some games on it. Sven lost on it. Everyone lost on it, mate. That's the point. So why do you think why is Ezreal so picked, but then why is it doing so poorly?
I have been a little bit surprised by the priority on Ezreal. I think part of it coming in is that the AD carry meta did shift, particularly with the Ashe nerfs that came through. So that's one more pick. And there have been a lot of Sivir bans as well throughout the tournament. So that sort of leaves you falling back on Jhin and Ezreal as sort of, and Caitlyn as more top tier picks. And the thing about Ezreal, though, is that when we see a lot of backline threats, so with champions that are very meta right now, like we see Kennen or Poppy or Rumble, where AD carry mobility can be at a premium, or Alistar that really do threaten AD carries, having that extra flash in the Arcane Shift is incredibly useful. Also, Ezreal is super powerful in the late game and does a ridiculous amount of damage while remaining mobile. It's just a matter of getting him there. And Ezreal is also one of those weird champions where he has like very strange power spikes. Like he's fine before first buy when he typically gets a tier and the enemy AD carry goes back. So if you're good at laning and you can prolong the laning phase until you can actually get tier and an offensive item, you can sort of salvage some of his crap laning phase. And also he, more than I think most other AD carries that I've noticed, is very dependent on what support he has in lane as to how effective that lane is going to be. Because if you pair him with a Karma, like that shit's ridiculous in lane. But he's pretty fucking weak with an Alistar in lane. So, meanwhile, like Caitlyn is more effective with an Alistar in lane.
Yeah, I absolutely think
you can chain CC into a trap. So,
yeah, I think that Caitlyn is going to be picked and banned so much more coming into the quarters, and that you could pick her with any support, and that'll allow the Alistar. Whereas Ezreal, people are actually going tier Cole because they're just trying to get that 2-item power spike so quickly on their first buy. And that's why I think we're only seeing success on it with the really, really good AD carries, because they know how to keep pressure on and actually not get into the mentality of, oh, I bought a tier, I need to play defensive. Like, they actually play Ezreal at his effective range, at maximum range, and they keep pressure on the lane, and they don't let it go. And that's what I think like Frey does really well. I think Bang does it really well as well. And so does Uzi, right? Guy buys a tier, and he's like, I'm going to go pickaxe next. I'm not buying that Glacial Shroud shit. And he just actually tries to destroy you in lane and keep that pressure on.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also think the other factor to the Ezreal picks is that Korea didn't play Caitlyn. Like, before coming into this tournament, Caitlyn was not at all a big pick in Korea. So I think that they learned, and in a meta now where laning is more important, the Caitlyn obviously becomes an increasingly valuable pick to have, and I think the Koreans didn't really have that in their pool. Now we did see them start to play the Caitlyn, particularly in the second week, but it wasn't something that I think they prepared very heavily coming in. So that's also probably the reason why we saw some more Ezreal losses, is that the Korean teams were prioritizing it. They took losses on the Ezreal, and then figured out that maybe, as Zirene is theorizing, that Caitlyn may be a more powerful pick going forward.
Do you think Caitlyn being super strong now actually plays into Forgiven Sansons? Because obviously a famous champion that he loves to pick, and he clearly picked it in these games here.
Yeah, certainly. I think you ban the Caitlyn if you're playing H2K. I would not let Forgiven have Caitlyn anymore. I don't think H2K stands. I don't think they're going to lose. I think there's a very low chance that they lose against Albus Nox in a best of 5.
Sure.
But even so, I think you just take that out, because that has been a main tool for their dominance.
Okay, so if ANX Albus did so well in the group, why can't they win a best of 5 against a team that most people, by the way, I know everyone's going to retcon it now that they always thought H2K was super sick. H2K famously broke down in the best of 5 stage of both playoffs at certain points in time, and 2 series they were actually favoured to win over the year. And so this is a team where actually famously, when it's a big pressure match, they usually did lose. And most people were like, I actually think they're worse than Splice. It was like the CLG scenario. Okay, you got the second seed from circuit points, but most people were like, oh, you might even lose to the third seed if you'd have played them. So why can't ANX beat them 3 games out of 5? Why can't that happen?
I mean, it could. But I think right now, with the way that they're playing, first off, I think a lot of the issues that they've had have been Jankos not really showing up in very high-pressure matches, but he has been recently. I think he had some pretty good performances over Worlds, so I'm less concerned that he's going to have some sort of collapse under pressure. Also, Ryu has been playing extremely well, much better than he had in Europe during the regular season, and he was always solid. So having him playing at a pretty excellent level right now, I just think that I don't see like H2K has been winning off of a strong laning phase, and yes, they sort of fumble around in the mid and late game with trying to take objectives and efficiently closing out games. But even with that kept in mind, I just don't see Albus Nox really able to overpower the lanes, because I think H2K is just going to get insane gold leads from the lanes, and even if they bumble around, Albus Nox doesn't have the team fighting or the decision making when playing from behind to really do much to close that out.
What do you think, Zirene?
I feel like H2K have a better grasp of what the meta is right now. I feel like Prawley, like huge props to him, because his drafts are all really good, and he knows that you have to pressure, shove the lanes in, and then get the vision and then make plays off of that, instead of the other way around, because I think Koreans go vision first and then they pressure off of the vision that they have and the knowledge that they have. But right now I feel like the meta is more winning lanes and then pushing from there because of 615, like the turret changes and stuff. So I feel like H2K have that big edge over Albus Nox there. Also, I got to watch I hate like scrims being a big like indicator of performance and stuff like that, but I didn't really ever see Albus Nox crush anybody in scrims or even win one, so they kind of collapse when they're behind. I feel like H2K with their strong laning phase is just going to get ahead and be able to snowball from there.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
What do you think, okay, then, about the group performance of Rox, but with a light to going forwards? Like, I mean, sure, listen, for context, obviously we have seen in the past, occasionally, Korean team might slip up like once. Like, I mean, a great example, obviously, where they slipped up a bunch was MSI and still came back and wrecked everyone in the best of fives. It didn't really matter and they looked dominant. Is Rox still the favourite for the tournament, Zirene?
Oh, God. The first week was actually not that great from them. And then, like, the last 2-3 games are actually pretty good. Like, Peanut woke up and, like, he was actually able to make those early plays, whereas before he was it looked like he was kind of fucking around and getting caught and punished. And, like, Rox Tigers, like, every time you watch them, they're laughing and stuff. Like, they're obviously having a good time even when they're behind. It's, like, a really cool thing about that team, but I think they're going to take it more seriously. I think that they might still be favorites right now, but Samsung and SKT are always in there, but I still think Rox are good. Maybe SKT are the number one favorites, and Rox are second. Not 100% on that though, but I think like Rox are number two in my opinion.
I think for me, Rox is still the favorites. Like Zirene's saying, I think that they did wake up and they had significantly better performances towards the end of day 2. And frankly, it is extremely fucking impressive that they even managed to stay in that Albus Nox game as long as they did. Their objective control was pretty remarkable for a team that far in the hole, and their team fighting we could see was still very good. Once Peanut actually got rolling in the early game, we also saw some more impressive plays out of him that helped. You know, he finally was able to like pick up a first blood and get really the snowball rolling. And in those games, it was pretty convincing. I mean, the rematch against Albus Nox was not a close game. And I think that once the Tigers have another week to prepare, they're going to be doing just fine, and they will return to a form that is more reminiscent of what we had seen in Korea, because they did play like shit in week 1. Really bad.
Yeah, their drafts were kind of strange too. I wasn't 100% on those. And that's what I love about Korean teams. You give them a week to prepare, they completely turn things around. Like, they go absolutely insane. Like, I was hearing about teams scrimming midnight to 2 a.m. blocks and, like, just playing new stuff. And, like, I think that's how the Zyra started coming out, is people were just like, let's just play this. Let's get it out there. Core JJ throws it out, and it turns out to be something that everybody else is probably going to pick up now. It's like, I don't know. I feel like Korean teams just, once they buckle down, they're way more efficient with their practice. It's not always practice more, it's just efficiency of practice, and they got that down.
So this is an interesting topic, because obviously it's going to tie into the whole World and Green drama, etc. Which, by the way, I don't think the drama is really worth commenting on that much. Like, actually, interestingly enough, I saw Chobra start to comment on it. If he ever wants to do a blog, Chobra would be the perfect person to talk about that specific topic, right? Because he's actually lived in both countries, not Weldon style, for a long time. He's actually from the, he would actually be the ideal guy because he knows this background. So I would leave it to someone like him to really set the record straight if he wants to. But just in terms of like the initial topic, which was the idea that like the Koreans weren't properly scrimming, or if they scrimmed against Westerners, they would fuck around a bit. I have to say, one thing that I'm getting really sick of, and the idea that this is one thing about Weldon that I will criticize here, okay? What I don't get is, this is a guy whose job is esports, right? And he's making public statements about esports and how people practice. If you really have followed League of Legends, how can we be in 2016 and people still are using the logic of like, we did really sick in scrims against Koreans, so why didn't we do as well in the tournament matches? Like every year at Worlds, this same story comes around. It's nearly always TSM, by the way, but there's usually a European org as well, you know, like a H2K this time. In the past, it was Alliance who were like, yeah, we were doing really well against Team X in scrims. And then here's the magical part that doesn't make sense. First of all, the Western team never does as well as they did in the scrims in the official games, but here's the key part that should be the kicker that people should be getting by now. The Korean teams never perform the same way in the scrims as they do in the official game. No one ever comes out right and says, oh, well, I always knew that Team X would do super well, because actually in scrims they did exactly this, and we just never saw it in official games, and then they brought it out and they were amazingly dominant and fantastic, and you know what, I could see this coming a mile away. That is the part that never happens. That part there, the penny never drops, Monty, until the game starts, the real game, and then it's like a different team turns up, you know.
We talked about this in the World's Prediction Show when Loco Doco, a former coach of TSM, was on this show, and I said, in my observations over the years of watching TSM scrim, is that TSM has a scrim culture of scrim to win, and they play their scrims very, very similarly to the way they play their official match, like really similarly. Meanwhile, as I recounted sometimes that I have been in person observing Korean teams, and even in the scrim leaks that we saw, SK Telecom just like wasn't banning anything against TSM, and yeah, they were losing some of those games, but it's like they were scrimming TSM in a way to see like what was powerful in the meta, what picks were these players good on, and TSM, when I have observed them. So here's another anecdote about watching TSM scrim. So at IEM Katowice, the one that they won, I was watching them scrim against the Tigers at that time. And I walked up and I saw Hojin playing Nidalee. Now, Hojin has 0 professional games on Nidalee prior to that point. And I had never seen him even play it in solo queue, okay? And I asked Hojin, I said, have you ever even played Nidalee before? And he said, no. And he was scrimming it against TSM. And I was looking at TSM's picks and like in the scrim, and it was literally exactly what they were going to play in the tournament. Right, so there's like a TSM, for all Weldon's comments about information warfare, and I don't know, I haven't seen them scrim recently. Well, actually, I did. I watched them scrim the SKT leaked games and shit. Yeah. So I did actually, and it looked the same to me. But I do think that there is a difference in the way in which many teams decide to scrim, and I think in terms of complaining about information warfare, in my opinion, TSM gives up 100% of everything that they do in scrims. So it's like you can't complain about information warfare when you're giving everybody the tools that they need to understand how to beat you.
Because the funny thing is, I made this comment, like my only comment on the whole World in Green thing in that scenario is, like I said, I didn't get into the other stuff. Like, actually, by the way, maybe as a little tease in case I do a video on it, I actually don't think the stuff he said was as bad as people have made out. I think they've like misconstrued some of it, you know, and some of it's just actually being kind of like a naive Westerner who doesn't understand that, like, for example, it's hard to see your own country's nationalism when you just are from that country. It's only the fact that something's nationalistic in a different way that will seem very jarring, you know. Things that, for example, to a European, I find it kind of insane when I see a country doing, like, pledges of allegiance in the modern world. So, okay, there's a small tease as to what I would say, okay. But, so I don't judge them all with it, so I don't think it's that big a deal. I think people blew a lot of it out of attention.
No. I don't think it's offensive to say that Korea or Japan are nationalistic. I think the phrase psycho-nationalism and then comparing it to North Korea in World War II is a fucking problem, right?
Sure.
There are other ways that could have been stated without, like, going to that extreme. So
okay, but here's my point. Okay, what the point I made, what I essentially weighed in with my point on Twitter, which I think is a pretty valid point, is if you're complaining, right, about the fact that these top Korean teams won't like scrim you, or they won't scrim you properly, and they won't play properly in scrims. If I knew that in practice someone was literally going to go 100% like a real fucking game all the time, and my culture is I want to practice things. Like in Counter-Strike, I don't know if you guys know this. I'll give you an analogy from another game. In Counter-Strike, you will purposely practice things like, this game, we're going to, the majority of the time, hit this particular site. Sometimes you might even tell the opponent, by the way, I want to really practice this, like, you know, like play the game. You don't just play it like a real match. And then, by the way, as a result, if the person plays for real, and you're like, well, no, I said I'm going to practice it, that would actually ruin your practice. That's why, in a mad way, people never got this. Why do you think Koreans were amazing by spending half their time practicing usually their shitter sister team that was never going to win the finals of the OGN, etc.? That's actually a famous thing in Korean esports, by the way. When people like Flash in StarCraft or MVP in StarCraft 2 or obvious examples would be like SK Telecom when they actually had like SKTS as a sister team. They're still practicing their sister team or practice partners that are much worse at the game as their main practice. Yeah, they practice some games against the other teams, but their main approach to improving are the games against, in theory, weak opponents. Yet the whole logic of Westerners is this mad logic of like, you got to go 100% and you've got to have the best possible opponent in practice to bring the best out of you. Like, that's like some mad myth that the West's still on. And so my point is, if I was Koreans and I saw that like TSM and Alliance and all the other teams that have come from the West just go 100% in scrims and then every single time accidentally mention in interviews how much they beat us and whether they did well against a specific player, I would be like, you know what? Fuck these guys. I'm not playing these guys much. I'm going to play them a little bit.
And leak your scrims. Which is also bullshit. And like,
magic that the Koreans never get their accounts hacked ever and any of this shit, right? Isn't it? It's amazing, isn't it? Oh, we never accidentally leave the password off.
Well, also, I think that Weldon did own up to the fact that it was ultimately the coaching staff's fault. But at the same time, like, why don't you have two-factor authentication on your fucking Google account or YouTube? Like, these are very preventable things that can happen. I personally use LastPass and two-factor authentication whenever possible. Like, I don't even know my passwords. You know what I mean? It's a random string of characters that is kept in a secure app, okay? It's easy. You know how much LastPass costs me? $1 a month.
Presenting our new sponsor, LastPass, advisable for all teams to use, and use the code name Monty Not at Worlds for 10% off now. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just making. There are many other like services you can use for that, but the point is that this is 100% on them. Like, there are always going to be people, just like getting DDoSed is sort of on you. It was on the team's responsibility back when Skype could give up your IP. It is a piece of shit software to do that, but they fixed it. But teams that weren't running their Skypes through a VPN were dumb, and they got DDoSed. And that sucks, but it was a preventable solution.
So, okay, the point you were making, Monty, basically is the other aspect that I would throw in, which is that when you basically practice at 100% as well, especially if the other guy doesn't give anything up, you're basically just training him how to beat you. And then you play him in a real game, and you're like, well, you know, I beat him a lot in practice. And he's like, yeah, motherfucker, thanks. And just gives you the beats like, yeah, guess what? That's not the best. Like, imagine that. Like, I'm just about to play you in a really important match. Oh, okay. Could you just play me however you're going to play now about like 7 times in a row, and then afterwards I'll play you in the real game? Sure. Oh, man, you are so good. You're beating me up again. Oh, don't do that again. Oh, shit. Bloody hell. Fuck me. Bjergsen, you're so sick, mate. At this point, why don't Koreans just start fucking with him? Just coming out in interviews like, Bjergsen is amazing. I especially think he would beat many of us on perhaps a champion like Oriana or something. He is very, very good. And then Bjergsen's like, yeah, shit, yeah, get my props. Like, yeah, this is sick, man. And then in the game, they're just fucking like mad, like comp that just destroys Oriana when he first picks it. Like, what? How could they know? How did... Wait a minute. Has someone leaked our private conversations? What's going on here? This like mad paranoia. It's not really that the mystery, is it, guys?
Oh man, yeah. It's just I think it's a very just different mentality that the Koreans have when it comes to scrimming compared. And I'm not saying every Western team is like TSM. I'm just using TSM as an example because I have had over the years seen this, or had teams that scrim against them tell me this, or have Loco Doco, their former coach, tell me this. Right, so.
I'll be honest, mate, most of them are like that. Like, even to this day, I still have teams who go to international competitions from the West, or even worse, probably the stupidest example, Monty, is when, like, a team comes to, for example, America or Europe when there's, like, an international event there, and teams who aren't at the event, you know, get to practice in, like, solo queue or in a scrim against some Korean team. These players talk about the one time they played some sick Korean player and did well. They don't even have to beat him, just did well, as though, like, yeah, so I'm pretty much better than Wei Zhao, like, and you know, Faker didn't even kill me 7 times in lane. Like, it's like what are you even talking about right now? Why does that matter? Like, this is the most pointless conversation I've ever had. So anyway, bringing it back on topic, let's go into Group B now because I do
want to touch on that like one
okay, yeah, come on,
a little bit because like I talked about Albus Nox not winning any scrims from what I had seen, but like from my experience, scrim results are kind of inverse to your actual performance at the tournament because they're playing like they're the worst and scrims, and then they learn a whole bunch and they learn the teams, and like we've basically been talking about it now, and then they come in and they play like they're the best. And then they have that mentality. And I think that's what you need to do is practice like you're the worst and then play like you're the best. And you learn so much from your scrims. The scrim isn't about bodying this guy in lane.
Yeah.
The scrim is about learning your limit break points, how much you can do with an item spike. You see people fucking trade and do the stupidest shit in scrims just to learn that they can or can't do it. And it's absolutely insane that some teams would play like they do on stage in a scrim. I've seen fucking item builds that blow my mind in scrims where I'm like, why is the guy even fucking trying that? That's awful. I know it's awful. Maybe he just wants to see if it is, and that's a good environment for him to do that. And that's what scrims should be, is like a experimenting ground. You set a goal. We're going to try to set up Baron as much as possible. Try to get every Drake this game. I'm going to draft you a comp that's good at doing that. Learn how to set up the vision and stuff. But not every team is doing that, from what I've seen.
And even if you, so for example, I would do this when I was coaching CLG. Sometimes, like you're saying, in a theoretical universe where you say, we're going to draft a comp and you guys are going to practice taking dragon. If you take every dragon and maybe your composition is focused on the early and the mid game, and you're not closing the game intentionally, you are repeatedly taking dragon until there are no more dragons, right? And maybe you lose that scrim because you have a shitty composition for the late game, but you succeeded in your goal of repeatedly taking dragon because that's what you were practicing, and it doesn't matter if you won or you lost, as long as you did what you intended to do.
Yeah. And like I've seen a scrim where the coach was like, all right, I want each of you to try to solo kill your lane opponent. It was like the stupidest thing in the world, but it's like, I want each of you to feel empowered to fuck this guy up and try to do it. And it was honestly the weirdest scrim I had ever seen, but it was pretty cool because the players were going crazy. They were all like really intense. But then even when they fucked up, they're like, shit, I can't really do that on this champion against that champion. It's like, okay, I learned that. That's what scrims are about. It's about learning. It's not about shitting on the guy and walking away with pride.
Okay, so...
Hey, man, that's all NA's got. Scrim wins.
We got Cloud9. We got Cloud9.
The irony, of course, Monty, if you think about it, really is, who is the one team in the last 2 years from NA who's had a really good international result? Oh, look, it's the team without all the sick mechanical individual players who don't just try and win lane and actually have fucking shot calling, team play for each other. You know, all the stuff that's on Weldon's fucking whiteboard is the stuff that CLG actually does. And then they're the ones who actually
CLG,
have the good...
to be fair.
Yeah, a long time ago, mate. And plus, that was back when he was using that like method of like, I help everyone 1%. Oh, you are 1% behind. I will now boost you 1%. If only everyone was to get 2% ahead, my next week's fee will be 2% more. Like he was working on the 2% principle, Monty. Okay, so he also helped Renegades, by the way. So in Group B, this was the one where Zirene's already suggested because of their performance here, he thinks maybe SK Telecom could be the new favourite. Wasn't this group kind of crap? Except for SK Telecom, yes. Monty?
Yes, it was. In fact, I think that two of the worst games, if not the worst games of the entire tournament were played in this group, and both of them were featuring Cloud9. The Cloud9 versus Flash Wolves game in Game 1 was so fucking absolute dog shit. It was unbelievable. And then in Week 2, the IMA Cloud9 game was also so absolutely dog shit. It was unbelievable. So I have basically no hope of like Cloud9 doing anything at all against Samsung. Their late game shot calling is a tragedy. It's a national tragedy for North America.
That Flash Wolves C9 game, like, Medios,
it's one of the worst games I've ever seen, by the way.
Like, my favorite part about that game is Medios spends 2 minutes, legitimately 2 minutes, I timed that shit, in a bush waiting for a Lee Sin kick. And I'm like, I admire that shit because he's like 0-4 in the game. He's like, I got to make this. He has one job. He has legitimately one job. He's like, I'm going to fucking do it. And I sit in this bush. It took him like 68 minutes to figure that out, but he got it done. So
he did make the game-winning play, to his credit, even though he was horrible on Lee Sin for the other like 68 minutes of that game.
Monty,
but
so this was something that was brought up, okay? Meteos feels hard done by that. He thinks that people shit on him for his Lee Sin, but he's against the best players in the world, and you know what, in scrims he's been really good on it, and he's prepped and everything, and people shouldn't go so hard. People made out like he was just total trash on the, and he has, and people have retconned this whole summer season so that he was never good because of how he did in the playoffs, you know. What is it? What is your estimations of Meteor so far at Worlds?
He's not very good. I mean, his Olaf has been okay, but ultimately, I anticipated that out of all the players on his team, he would be the weakest member, and I still think that's true. I think actually Smoothie's been performing above expectations. Impact has been pretty good. Jensen has been maybe doing a little bit worse than maybe we expected him to do, given his performance over the course of the summer season. I think Zirene probably has more intimate knowledge, definitely, of this team than I do. So I'd be interested to hear his thoughts on their performance at Worlds versus their performance during summer.
I still feel like Jensen's a lot the same. I feel like he tries to do too much. Like, if you watch him, his movements relative to Meteos, like, he'll Orianna shockwave the enemy mid laner when Meteos is in base, and he's like not communicating his back timings. He feels like it's completely like cut off from the team. It feels like Cloud9 is 4 people and then Jensen, and Jensen's just trying to do way too much. Like, if he just slots himself into the team, if he's like actually communicating on the level that these world-class teams are, where it's, hey, I need to back because I can buy Morello, like simple shit like that, like don't make a play top, like they're going to be actually pretty okay. I'm not going to say great, but I feel like he's completely out of sync with the entire team. And that's been a problem for a while now. But like Impact's still doing Impact things, maybe like not as crazy because he was styling on NA top laners, and it's kind of a different competition now. But then Cloud9's bottom lane, I think Sneaky's actually been pretty good. Sneaky and Smoothie have been actually pretty damn good. And Meteos is really inconsistent depending on the champion that he's on. So I feel as though Cloud9 are pretty similar to the way they were in the end of the season, but not like the gauntlet.
But remember, Monty, everyone was just going to exploit those terrible junglers on SK Telecom, and surely people would beat SK Telecom. What happened, mate? What happened? I kept waiting for that to. When's it going to happen now? It's almost like they look trash.
I can't.
Only against Koreans. Why does that keep happening? What is going on? I don't understand it, Monty.
I think one of the most infuriating things about watching predictions for this tournament was watching the desk when in the first matchup people were predicting Cloud9 to beat SKT. Like, literally on what basis are you making these predictions?
Oh, I remember, Monty. That was the one, right, where it was Froskurin and Kobe, and what they did was Froskurin just literally said along the lines of, like, I know this isn't, they're actually the underdog in this game, something, like, never actually gave any analysis and just sort of said, like, but I'm going with Cloud9 for this one. And then what Kobe does, he attempted analysis, but then he fell short in as much as he just said what I just said there, which is sort of like, you can, something like you can exploit SK Telecom's junglers and not as good player. But then he never explained why, like, Meteos would do that, though. Like, what? That's the part I didn't get right. It's like, a point I'm kind of making here is not that Bengi and Blank are amazing. It's that you have to be much better than them to actually be able to take advantage of said mistakes. And didn't we learn this from TSM over the whole fucking summer split? Like, doesn't matter if you can see a mistake, can you do anything about it? And so far, the answer is no.
Also, just to point out that, yes, Blank has been shit in Korea, but he was shit at some points in week 1, but he played better in week 2. And you cannot ignore the fact that, yes, Blank is shit in Korea, but he has already won 2 international tournaments this year. This year. So he isn't as shit when it comes to playing outside of Korea. And you also, as you say, there has to be some way to exploit him. And when, in my opinion, Meteos is the weakest member of Cloud9 right now, you're not going to get a lot of value out of that jungle versus jungle matchup.
Well, plus, one of the things about Blank that's underrated in this tournament is if the enemy jungler does not play Nidalee, just by playing Blank, you get a free ban against your team. They will have to ban that champion. Basically, yep. Right? So now that's another free pick for some of the best solo laners in the whole fucking world.
Who was it that banned Nidalee against Bengi? That shit was fucking funny, yeah. Hilarious.
I think that might have been, that was Cloud9 actually. No, wait, so was it? Let me think.
Yes, it was
Cloud9.
Yeah, it was Cloud9.
It was. Why? And what's even weirder about that is Reaper should know this better, that he is fucking Korean. He knows Bengi. He was playing at the same time as Bengi does. Bengi has never in his life played a professional game of Nidalee.
Okay. I think they went to ban Nami and they accidentally pressed the wrong buttons and they knocked in the Nidalee
In fact, in Korea, whenever Bengi plays, even when Nidalee was like unquestionably the most powerful ban, SK Telecom always banned Nidalee when when Bengi was in the roster.
I mean, that's part of why Blank is in SK Telecom right now, basically. Was when, like, Graves and Nidalee were champions you had to play, so we had to get Bengi the fuck out of that jungle position. Okay.
It's like Kindred, too, yeah.
Here's a question for you. So, it's just a quick one. But in general, I mean, you have to say Jensen was, like, he didn't really perform at an insane level in his time. Okay, he's someone where you would have thought in this group, okay, he has a chance. Like, I think Maple's very good, but I had them at, like, similar levels. You know, Faker, okay, Faker's Faker. Like, you can't expect people to just beat him. But that first game, I love when people trash talk, right? Because it's good for entertainment. But part of the entertainment is also when you fall flat on your face. So if you just go out there and you're like, I can't wait to clap Faker, and then he just straight up repeatedly abuses you 1v1, that's really good. I love that. That's very, very funny. That's like amazing slapstick comedy. That's really sick shit, you know? That was pretty good, right? Yeah, that was legit.
Also, I mean, it's not. I don't feel bad when people are like retweeting that because obviously Jensen
he knows
was
that,
joking
yeah,
about it
exactly.
When he said it in the first place. He was doing it in a tongue-in-cheek way, and it just ended up being funny.
It's just
I don't
funny,
think Jensen feels bad about that or like it's shitting on Jensen or anything. He was just having a laugh.
Yeah, I think like people take trash talk way too seriously in the community and like give people too much shit when it backfires. Like trash talk is so good for the fans. Like you get people invested. It's awesome. Yeah. We need more of that shit.
Yeah, and
that's going to be used in the trailer for some of the insight there.
Just like it was also. Just like it was also, you know, when Perks was trash talking before MSI, it was also funny. He didn't, you know.
That's why I can't handle Monty.
People are way too hard on Perks.
That's the part that
Perks is very entertaining.
That's the part that I've just completely checked out on though. Like I'm done with those guys now, Monty. Like what's great is, do you remember in spring season when Perks and Yankos were making all these EU LCS games that traditionally NA fans don't like to watch super entertaining because they were all doing this mad trash talk backwards and forwards and bantering each other on the desk, which is all great shit. But you know the problem, because they're all young guys and they've been humiliated by some of these losses and performances. All they did is the second they lose, they always come on Twitter like, I will be off social media for the next 3 months. Sorry guys, bye. So, the whole point is you sort of do it while you win, you do it while you... It's a fun thing, you know. It wasn't serious. You weren't committed to that in some mad way.
And in fact, I think this has been... I understand that people get really mad, but one thing... and it's mostly Americans, again. We've been over this many times. I think it's Americans who get butthurt. Because one of the best parts for me about EU playoffs this year was the whole, like, God-given versus wrecking crew. Like, shit was awesome. And none of the Europeans were taking that seriously at all. I didn't see any like giant blowback. People were just having fun.
And I love that shit because it ended in the way that it should have, like exchanging jerseys. Like that shit was cool. I loved it that they went out there. They like kind of actually bet with house money in a way. And then they, at the end of the day, everybody kind of won there. I mean, of course, you know,
it was good.
Fucking walks away winner, but still.
See, I know you say you loved it, Zirene, because you like the sportsmanship. You're probably like a much more like amiable guy, very likable guy. I didn't like it, okay, because what happened is Forgiven actually did just like exchange jerseys and then take a picture with like his buddy, Reckless and all that stuff. Like, yeah, just some things I know. Like, I think that's kind of bullshit if you know some things I know. So what I wanted to happen, Zirene, this is what I really want to happen, because you have to understand, I'm a very petty person. Like, the whole thing, I will wait for years. I mean, everyone knows this from this week. I will wait years if I need to. And then when the moment comes when I can succeed, and people are like, well, you have forgotten about all that stuff. I'm like, oh, no, it's been on my mind the whole time. So I'm now going to just destroy you. So what I wanted to do, Zirene, because this is the best chance ever to just destroy Reckless at the key moment, okay, is when he came over... What you do is, as he hands you your jersey, you pull out a marker pen and you sign Forgiven on it and hand it back to him. That would be the most god body sick burn at his lowest moment. And just be like, keep a hold of it, son. It's a real Eddie Carey's signature there. God. And then just fucking style out of the room like, I'm out. I'm out.
Holy shit.
That would be sick, right? That would be...
Fucking drop the marker.
The level of that would be unreal, wouldn't it? You'd never recover from that mentally. Like, it'd fuck with you the rest of your life, you know. Put it this way, the rest of his life, Reckless, one of the most conservative players of all time, would be playing in team fights like Whoosh when he was trying to go balls deep on Stixay every fight. Like, just fucking flashing in, trying to go in, come on, fuck up! So it'd be you'd tilt him for life. It'd be sick. That's my thought, anyway. So
that is good. I can't argue. I can't argue. Although, I mean, everybody's used to be, you know, you being petty, Thorin. You actually named yourself after a fictional character who is trying to get his home back, trying to actually get his friends to help him, and ultimately had a breakdown over a gemstone.
But
instead of any kind of cause, right?
got too distracted from his goal by Skrilla, basically, gold lust, and became maniacal as a result and started wars over it. So that part has nothing to do with my career, though, Monty. That was just, I'm just referencing the movie for everyone there. So here's the question then. Going forwards in Group B, has this reaffirmed, if it was such a crap group, has this reaffirmed Monty's belief that like SK Telecom wins the whole event and they can win the event and all this stuff? Like,
that's not my belief. I think Rox is going to win, and I think this is that's more or less of a testament. I mean, we can talk about the breakdowns in Group A as well, and Rox underperforming, but I don't really think that this group really tested SK Telecom in a meaningful way.
See, the only reason that I think that SKT are still tournament favorites is because I think they've always matched up well against Rox. And if they meet in the semis, I still predict the SKT win over Rox. So Rox are clear if like SKT get beaten by Royal. Like, I don't know how likely that is.
I think that it all depends on Peanut. That's what I think. I think the last time we saw Rox and SKT in a best of 5, it was Peanut's first best of 5 of his entire career, and he's only played in 2 best of 5s ever, and he has not been terrific in either of those best of 5s. So if he can play at his regular season level, I think there's a good chance that Rox can beat SK Telecom. If Peanut chokes again, then I do give the favorite SKT. But for me, it's all dependent on Peanut's performance.
Do you think Peanut's a choker?
I don't think we have enough information to make that judgment yet, because again, we have seen 2 best of 5s, maybe.
That's the downside to that format, is that in the old OGN format, to win the tournament, obviously you had to play 3 best of 5s. So even after one season, if someone went deep, you had a really good idea of who they were, etc., etc. Whereas what's mad is you can get a scenario like the one we had here, where essentially you can play 2 best of 5s in a whole season. Now, here's the thing. In a sense, for people who don't know this, that format of basically they use a gauntlet for their playoffs, right? That format actually comes from, in Korea, they used it for StarCraft, right? That was the way Pro League used to work. And the thing with Pro League is, that actually is quite a good format, because what you're rewarding someone is you have to play like a bazillion games in the regular season, right? So if you finish top in Pro League in that scenario, which obviously it's a 1v1 thing, but it's a team game, you send out one person and then another person, another. In that sense, it's not as big a deal, right? It's not a big an issue in that particular sense. But problem is for League, it does have, like, I actually am not a fan of it that much now. I've seen it that much, because my biggest problem with it is, in theory, the best team in the league plays the least series. So I want if think of all the great runs in the past, SK Telecom going 15-0, etc. Like, you're chopping out half of that basically. Like, so I think, unfortunately, after watching it a lot, I like it for like the qualification for Worlds aspect that we've got, like the gauntlet aspect. That's pretty cool. But I'm just not that fan of it as the playoffs that good in that sense. You know, I feel like you just get to see less of the best team. You know.
Yeah, and also the 3 Korean teams that we have at Worlds during the playoffs in summer, you never saw any of those 3 play each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it was really hard to actually tell, like,
it's because everybody just plays Samsung.
Where's everybody else? Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Like,
it's actually literally what happened. Everyone just played KT.
Yep.
Yeah, which obviously, by the way, itself isn't as good for the storyline. Because, for example, one of the great things about when Samsung White beat Samsung Blue in the semis of Season 4 Worlds is that they had literally played in the summer. I think that was the semis as well, and they'd beaten them there.
They played in 2 semis that year.
So yeah, that made the story better that they then overcame them in the big tournament. Okay, I have one last question about this group, and I have 2 more actually. One more. I'll do the serious one first. So the serious one is, how does Flash Wolves keep doing this, Monty? How do they keep beating SK Telecom?
I don't know. I think Karsa, they have a more powerful mid-jungle combination, and they play well around that. And Karsa, I think, played pretty well over the course of the tournament. Yeah, MMD is kind of whatever in the top lane.
Like, forget wildcards. Shouldn't everyone in the world be studying whatever the fuck Flash Wolves does against Korean teams? This should be like the number one thing Westerners start studying. That hire the Flash Wolves as the coaches. I don't know. What do you think, Zirene? What do you put it down to?
God. So just judging off of like the last time they actually played each other, like, I actually don't know. I feel like Flash Wolves, the LMS region, is just a kind of a mix of LPL and LCK. They're like right in the middle in terms of style, because they scrim both of those regions regularly. So they're kind of like, they've figured out how to win with less amazing players. But then when you have Maple and Karsa, who are amazing players, they're able to just kind of push that advantage. So like they just kind of boned Faker really hard. It was like Blank doesn't know how to be around the mid lane and actually cover for Faker. And then you just keep sending Karsa there.
Or Faker is playing too aggressively when Blank is like counter jungling or weird shit like that.
That was really strange. That was actually kind of like what I was talking about with Jensen and Meteos. It looked exactly like that, where Faker's pushing up and it's like Blank is not even close. So that's not how it happens normally, but I mean, it finally turned around, right? Like SKT finally beat them.
So here's the less serious topic, okay? Like you have to realize, Zirene, every now and then I do kind of just purposely bring some up on the show just to try and trigger Monty. And so here's the question, Monty. So you know how in China you can never rely on the fucking good teams in China to actually live up to it at Worlds somehow. Like even the old really good ADG with Name never really did it, you know. OMG's always sort of disappointed a little bit. You know, like obviously the newest EDG with Def never quite lived up to it at Worlds. So how the fuck did the same Flash Wolves who beat SK Telecom lose to a team that was almost some sort of mad, like old school solo queue argument in the fucking like role selection page, and one of the stupidest like Athena, famous mid laner, playing Lee Sin, and obviously then you had fucking Avoidless playing Alistair. Like Baime has been like, what is this game? And then how did they win it?
because the Flash Wolves have terrible late game shot calling. I mean, it was abysmal in the first week of competition. They were good at getting leads out of the laning phase and playing around Karsa's early game. But once it came to, you know, it's just kind of a coin toss, I feel, in the late game, even if they have a huge advantage.
I mean, that game was an abortion, right?
What? Oh, yes, it was terrible. I mean, that's what I said, is that the games in this group were really low quality.
Okay.
At least G2 would like die quickly.
So then going out of this group, what hope can there be for Cloud9, Zirene? I mean, here's the thing, okay, so Samsung Galaxy, and we're going to get to them in terms of in-depth, but the hyper on Samsung Galaxy, interesting enough, is actually LS who kind of crystallized this for me when we had that show, is that if you let them get to a late game, that's where they're super strong. Right? That's where, like, Crown's going to be insane, for example. And actually, some of the early games, yeah, they were winning at, like, 45 minutes, or 37 minutes, or whatever, but towards the end of the tournament, they did have a couple where they just styled on people like 24 minutes, 23 minutes. Like, can Cloud9 do anything before you get to like the late game when in theory Samsung Galaxy is super sick? Like have you seen anything in this group?
Only thing is, like, if Cloud9 draft like a really good bottom lane, or like they get their hands on Jhin or something, like Jhin Karma, and then they're able to actually like push Ruler in and maybe Core JJ, whoever they're using. That's like the only way that I could ever see them really getting a good advantage. And then like Sneaky would probably just go mid and start hitting W's onto the mid laner and trying to fuck over Crown. But that's how I see it going if Cloud9 are actually going to win it. But otherwise, I feel like it's really hard because Ambition has been playing so well.
But do you think, Monty, of Cloud9's chances going forwards?
Really bad. I expect them to get 3-0'd by Samsung.
3-0.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with the bold 3-0 prediction here for Samsung. I think Samsung has been surprisingly on point. They looked really strong in the second week of competition. Crown has been playing out of his mind. I think you have to ban the Victor, even though you don't want to ban the Victor, because arguably there are more important mid lane power picks to get rid of, but he has an extremely deep champion pool, so that shouldn't really be an issue for him. I mean, his Karma is also very good. This is a wonderful meta for Cuvée. He's always been, back in the day, the big bans on Cuvée used to be GP and Ryze, and he's always been a caster player, first and foremost, and now he can just sit all day and play Rumble and Kennen and Echo and things that he's super good at in the top lane and be very impactful. Core JJ coming in is a better lane support than Wraith, and basically Samsung has said that themselves. They said Core JJ is the better player, has better in lane, has better synergy with Ruler, but Wraith he's more like, first off, Samsung's late game shot calling is very good. With Core now, when he first debuted, it was actually, you could tell how much Wraith was impacting the shot calling because they just didn't play well in the late game without Wraith, but now they've switched that up. So Wraith was the guy who was more an important voice around objectives. But I think what's so impressive to me about Samsung right now is that they have some of the best Baron control in the tournament, if not the very best. They know they can very clearly understand exactly how they're going to bait a Baron, exactly how they're going to control the vision around that Baron. They set up fights around Baron beautifully. They know which targets to focus down in these late game team fights. The late game team fighting is very strong. So I just don't see a way that C9 really has to abuse them, because they're coming in with more or less, a newer player in the bottom side with Smoothie. So taking advantage of Ruler, who's a rookie, becomes more difficult. And just in general about Samsung, I want to sidebar a little bit. One thing that really pissed me off was that when I was watching Worlds tonight and people talk about the next week of play, basically everybody was just on the broadcast crew seemed to be writing off Samsung and saying oh, it's just going to be Royal and TSM who make it out of this group. And the only thing I heard discussed was Ruler's a rookie, so he's going to get caught out and die a lot. And I was I really think you're underestimating Samsung.
I remember there was a guy once who did a video and he implied that having a team full of rookies, some of them could choke in the playoffs, and everyone was you are an idiot, you could never make a comment like that, and he was universally reviled, actually. So, and I'm just saying, maybe we should revisit that, and maybe he was right. Even if he was wrong, maybe he's right. So, he definitely was wrong, but maybe he was right. That's all I'm saying. So.
I think that people were sleeping on Samsung a little bit, and I think they've shown themselves to be very powerful, at least in this particular meta. And once Ambition stopped doing weird Ambition invades, which we'll probably see some in the playoffs for sure. He does that. That's just who he always has been since he switched over to being a jungler. So I think the weird Ambition invades and dives could be a way for C9 to get back into this, but I don't think he's going to do it.
I think the meta is even better for Ambition. I think Skarner's really good for him. I think he picked up the Olaf, and I think that Crown can now just play shoving mid laners and just keep playing to Ambition in the enemy jungle. He can go do those invades as long as Crown is pushing up. Dude loves Victor. Ryze is great at wave clear early now. So I feel there's almost never a situation where Ambition invades and Crown can't help him out. He can kind of play his game now.
Can Samsung Galaxy win Worlds, though?
Possibly.
It's possible, yeah.
I wouldn't give it good odds, but I would give them extremely good odds of making the final.
Okay, so pulling it back a second. In Group C, you have to start with the big name, obviously, EDG. Every Worlds, somehow EDG does something that kind of makes you lose hope a little bit in China, right, Monty? How the fuck does EDG lose to Ints and then lose 2 out of 3 games to H2K? Remember, Monty, you called their bot lane the best bot lane in the world. You did that.
I did, and
you said
also
that, and you meant that.
Also, I did. And also, especially with the help they were getting from ClearLove too, you would have thought that was going to be a little bit easier for them. But
by the way, quick
they
sidebar.
did struggle.
I just want to point out, I've just got to say this while I remember it. What are the odds of this, right? I literally, a few weeks ago, messaged Kelsey privately. I did a DM and I said to her, one thing I think you've improved a lot, actually, is you've got really good at making titles that are really, quite clever, but they also draw me in. And then literally, no joke, 2 hours later, she, replied, you might want to take that back now, because the next title she did was, Mako or Breako. That was, the one about, the fucking... And I was yep. My mistake. Might have pulled the trigger a little bit too quickly on that one. That's one of the worst ones I've ever heard in my life. So go ahead. I had to put that out there. That is actually not how bad that is. Okay. Jesus Christ.
I love Kelsey's sense of humor.
That's a fucking bad, though. That is bad. Okay, what were you saying about EDG, the bot lane?
They have been struggling. They did show that they were struggling against H2K. That was quite... I mean, obviously, everybody knows that Forgiven's a great player in the laning phase, and Vander always has been as well. So it's not inconceivable that would happen. I certainly would have put Vander and Forgiven in theory as one of the stronger lanes.
Do you think there's anything to that theory I had that maybe at this point we have to start looking at Deft as a potential choker? Or just underperforms internationally for some reason compared to how super sick he is?
The thing is how can we even know? Because Mouse is such a dumpster fire that when that's the thing is that I disagreed with Spawn saying that it was a good matchup. It's going to be a good matchup because Smeb is going to do disgusting things to Pawn, or to Mouse, not to Pawn, to Mouse. And when
They wish they could put Pawn in the top lane.
Yeah,
It'd probably
maybe
be
they
a
should,
better
actually.
solution.
Maybe they should.
You got you
but-
get 3 Koreans and you can't do that.
Damn.
Sucks.
The rest of the world's problems only can have 2 Koreans on your team.
Unlucky.
Ironically as well, come on guys, if you're going to buy Koreans, I'd make top lane a priority myself. I'd stop buying fucking supports and mid laners. Like, I think you can handle
be
getting a few
fair-
mid laners in LPL. What are you doing?
To be fair, all of the top laners from Korea that have gone to China have sucked.
No,
after they got to
Acorn was
China.
really good the first
Okay, Acorn
2
was
splits.
good.
So
Acorn
that
was the
that
only
one was good, yeah. I agree the others did. They all went to shit, unfortunately. Okay.
So, I think that it's like a horrendous matchup, and in a meta where you can play all these caster top laners, and they're going to get it, like stack a bunch of AP on you and then wreck you and wreck the entire team. That it's very difficult for them to win at all, and it's very clear that Mouse is getting die-risked here, and he's getting hung out to dry by every other member of his team during the laning phase, and he's also not a very good player to begin with, so it's like doubling down on the pain.
Yeah, it's pretty awful because even if they help him, he's not a good enough player to use the resources they give him.
Exactly.
And then they try to help him late game, and then as soon as Clearlove tries to help him, it's like, oh shit, they're doing Baron on the other side of the map. Ah, fuck, that's the game. It's like, it's over at that point. That happened like 2 games in a row to them.
I remember watching that. That was hilarious.
Because the funny thing is, it feels like EDG as an org are doing what TSM was doing in like Season 5, where you have like band-aid solutions that work in your region, but you're never going to win worlds. Like, for example, like it's not even just keeping Dyrus. Like, if you remember, like Santorin as a jungler, like let's keep Lost Boy forever, and just, you know, like you're doing things which will let you win in your region, but you're not going to win worlds with that. And so now they've come to 2 worlds in a row with what ended up being a subpar top laner. They had Amazing J last time, to the extent that it went so badly, they literally like panic swapped Coro 1 back in, who hadn't even been playing in the team. And then now they're in the scenario with this Mouse guy who, I don't care how many times people tell me like, yeah, but to be fair, what expectations did he have? He was a support player. Yeah, he did just win LPL, mate. It's not like we didn't watch like a billion games of him play, you know?
And EDG did show cracks because like their match against WE was really terrible, and they nearly lost. Now they did get it together and sweep the finals and have a very dominant performance. But Royal also was terrible in the finals.
You've set me up here, Monty. You've set me up here. So I have to bring up another of our classic themes for the show. Okay. So speaking of that WE series, one player who inexplicably picked Hecarim in 3 games in that series and power farmed 2 of them to a loss, very impressively done. Made himself look like a right tit in 2 of those games, was Clearlove. And Clearlove's back, Monty. He's back. You know that guy...
Clearlove is definitely another Monte... I tweeted this, but the Dave Monte Award, I think our front runners right now are probably Mithy, Double Lift, and Clearlove.
No, here's what happens, Monty. I've figured it out, okay. So, you know the Uzi Eye Worlds buff? There's an opposite one that is applied to Clearlove in exchange for that. It's like when you play Black in Magic the Gathering. You have to give something up to gain additional power. So you have to give up the masterful jungling and ganking of Clearlove in order to get that power, that extra damage onto Uzi Eye. That's what happens every Worlds, Monty. So Clearlove, pretty good jungler, right? He's only been hailed 2 worlds in a row as the best jungler in the world, and shit lebed. Fucking hell, man alive! What is this? What is this? What is this? What's happening?
He's been not great. He has been not great.
What do you think the issue is, Zirene?
I actually can't explain it more than like he's being spread too thin, because right now it's like Mouse is just such a, like, even before it was like Amazing J, like these guys are taking so much from them. So he'll set up the bottom lane, and either the bottom lane runs over the entire game, or you get run over because their top laner is way stronger. Like he has to try and do something in these games, and he's like, I can't leave Mouse out to dry forever because I lose too much. Like the enemy starts split pushing, he starts losing his tower for no fucking reason, and that's what I think it is. I feel like it's not always Clearlove's fault directly, but I feel like he's just not always making the best choices with like relative to the players that he has on the team. Like, fucking just can't bottom forever. Like, I don't care if Mouse gets Poppy, 100%. Just go somewhere else. Just keep doing that, or bring Mouse to the team and then crush them 4v5 or 5v4 if they're split pushing. Like, I feel like they're just not making the right choices in those macro decisions.
What do you actually think about H2K suddenly coming good, like at the fucking 11th hour, and actually getting out of this group in first place?
I just think their lanes are super good. Like,
Yeah.
Prawley knows how to draft. He knows how to set up his players. He knows his players really well and what they want to do. It's like, Caitlyn, go. Get Karma, go. Like, now it's starting to be banned against them because it's just so fucking good. And Ryu also stepped up. Like, Ryu was playing really well. His Rise was probably the best Rise of the tournament. I would actually say hands down. Like, Crown played a good Rise, but I still think Ryu's was better. The way he was using the ultimate was unique compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Ryu.
Okay, unique in what sense? What do you think he did differently?
So I feel like he doesn't actually use it in the most obvious way. A lot of people will use it in the most obvious way because it's kind of a mind game too, because you can send one person in and it's just like, oh, we sent the Rek'Sai to your backline. Whereas the enemy always thinks like, oh, they're sending 3 people and they're all going to show up here. It's like, oh, there's just the fucking Rek'Sai, and you made them back up a little bit, and then the rest of the team like runs forward because they'll start to collapse on him afterwards. So I feel like what he does is really cool, and you'll use it mid-fight a lot too, to like get to the other side and start chasing people down.
Okay, Monty, I'm going to use this moment to just call out the Western fan base, okay? Specifically the NA fan base mainly. So here's what I want to do, okay? One thing I hate, it's a pet peeve of mine, is when people just constantly retcon everything that just happened and then all of history to fit whatever happened today, as though today was like the fucking attractor pulling history towards it and everything had to lead to this moment. So here's the key aspect that's tilting me the most about that, Monty, okay? Is when you talk about this group, you know what everyone says? That's bullshit, isn't it? H2K just had an easy group. Right, so let's just put all this together. You have to think all these things simultaneously in your brain, okay? So RNG, they're a shit team because they got shit stomped by EDG in the finals of LPL. Same RNG who bodied TSM. Meanwhile, same EDG who bodied said RNG lost 2 out of 3 games to H2K. And by the way, EDG were considered a tournament favourite, maybe the 3rd best team overall. A lot of people had them ahead of Samsung, etc., because they obviously really showed themselves in this group. So what's mad about that is that's what level of haters some of the NA fans are. That they will actually say, what all you did is just win your group outright. Yeah, here's the thing. This group was an easy group for getting second place. That was the part it was meant to be easy for, because all you had to do was beat AHQ. To then beat 2 out of 3 times one of the tournament favourites, it's pretty fucking good. Like, how is that not getting props? And also, then how does that not somehow deserve... Oh, yeah, you got an easier bracket, but you were the first seed again, remember? You're supposed to, in theory, get an easier bracket. What the hell is everyone talking about at this point in time? Like, RNG all of a sudden, everyone's rewritten that they were fucking gods all along, just because they put old TSM in the fucking dumpster-rooney. That's the end of that rant. There was no real point to it. I shouldn't really. I wanted a strong landing. I didn't end strong, but the spirit was there. The spirit was there. I feel like the gist was good. I was hitting all my key points and that, and at the end I just had nothing. It was though pretty impressive to come first place, right? That's pretty good.
I think it was very good. I think it was very impressive, and especially their week 2. I do think, as Irene's saying, that you do have to give a lot of credit to Prawley because their adaptation was very good, and I think teams are going to take a lot away from watching the draft of H2K and seeing that they had such an impressive 4-0 result in the second week of competition, drafting around primarily strong lanes.
Okay, so H2K. I mean, we've already talked about within the Albus one. Presumably, I mean, they've got an extremely good chance of making the semi-finals here. Like, no matter what you think of Albus Nox, H2K have the best chance a really good Western team has ever had to make the fucking semis, essentially.
You could argue that last year when we saw Origin in their quarterfinal draw also did have a pretty compelling matchup to sort of more or less get an easy ticket to the semis. But this one's pretty. I would be shocked.
By the way,
Snox was able to win that.
Everyone really slept on that joke by fucking Forgiven, where he was doing the interview with Shox and he said that like he was playing against basically like 2v3 in the bot lane. He said he was playing against Deft and Mako and Clearlove, and everyone started. Now here's the thing, like, I will give everyone a pass on that because Forgiven does sound like he's like about to go into some sort of like fucking like Benzo's coma and he's like choking on his own words. Like, so I get it, like, it's hard to understand the accent. I've talked to him a lot and I sometimes struggle, right? But that was a pretty fire joke. He did just come up with that on the spot. Like, that was sick. Give respect.
I enjoyed that.
So what does it mean though, Monty? This is a moment of sweetness, remember. Here's the good thing, Monty. On this show, we've never betrayed Forgiven. We've always maintained a little area of bias on the edge of the show, where even if the meta isn't working and he's not working his team, we're always like, but if he was on the good team, though, where they played around the AD carry, he'd be super sick. And you know what, Monty? That stock that I told you to invest in, it's come up good, mate. He's going to the semis of World. Maybe more. What do you think of that? Forgiven comes good at the end.
I love it. He's one of my favorite personalities in the scene. I love watching him play. I like how he not only sticks to his play style, whether it is like in meta or not. He refuses to change. You know what you're getting 100% with Forgiven, and it's the right place and the right time to be Forgiven right now.
I mean, I've told you this before, Monty. I've mentioned this on the show before, but it's not a joke. This isn't for the cameras, okay? This would be a great persona if you're a WWE wrestler. But he really is so ridiculous as a human that he actually is one of the only people I've ever met who would rather lose the game that he is paid professionally to play than pick a champion he thinks is easy and win in an easy manner where someone could just say, you just won because of that champion. Like, yeah, you still win, though, mate. You still win.
He refuses to play Sivir the Scuttle Crab, when it was like the best champion and the best AD carry. And he plays it now, but at the time, he has these strong opinions about what he is going to do, and he knows what kind of player he is, and he knows what his strengths are, and he will just play to those.
Like, he is literally more an anime character than like almost any Western player I've ever seen. He's that ridiculous archetype of like the guy who's like super entitled, usually like for a rich family or something, And he's like super good at the things, but like he only plays a certain way, and like it's just so ridiculous. What do you think, Zirene, of H2K and Forgiven potentially going to semis? What do you think that means?
I think that's really cool. Like, I love like that last play where he's like, #1, baby. Like, I want more of those moments. I think that if he makes semis, like if he goes off and makes finals, like that's fucking amazing. That would be incredible if Forgiven goes that far. Like, sure, I feel like history's gonna not always remember that they had kind of an easy way there, but they're gonna remember that Forgiven fucking made the finals. Like, I love Forgiven. I think that he's such a great personality to have in the scene, and Europe has honestly sometimes been very bland and vanilla, and it's kind of hurt the broadcast in a lot of ways, and that's why they've tried to build up like coach week, player week, get their players more on camera to build their brands. But Forgiven just does that himself. Like, Forgiven is the guy who's fucking by far, and that's his answer. Like, I love that so much because it gives the fans in Europe something to root for and hate. And you were talking about it at the beginning of the show, right? Like, people click on your thing even though they hate you. It's like the opposite of love in our business isn't hate, it's indifference. Like, if people don't care about you, that's awful. If they hate you, that shit's good.
Yep. Well, that's why that's always why I reference the Oscar Wilde quote, right? Which is, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
Yeah.
Also,
if I like something on Forgiven style, then I think Forgiven's just going to play for Lane all the time.
There's also an aspect as well where, first of all, like, Forgiven's one of the only people I've ever seen of a Westerner who actually really, I'm not joking, like, you could put him on like fucking truth serum, lie detector test. He actually does believe he is the best player in League of Legends. That's not a joke. Like, not best AD carry, not best Western. He thinks if you take away, like, for example, if I said, like, well, Faker's obviously better than you, he'd just start, like, ranting about, like, mid lane has, like, biases and favors. Yeah, but, Smeb is a pretty amazing player. Yeah, fucking Koreans and, like, the coaches is helping him. Like, you don't understand. He can rationalize everything. So he actually does believe he is the best player in League of Legends. That's not a joke. Like, anyone in the West, like, okay, say Bjergsen does an interview. Now, admittedly, Bjergsen's not a great pick in terms of interviews because he'll, like, naturally will try to be humble and be like, I think, like, Faker's a great player. But the reason I picked Bjergsen is because if you were going to pick a player on skills who could come out and say, I actually think I'm as good as the most of the Koreans, and I could probably beat anyone except Faker. Someone like that could get away with it. The difference is, even the ones who would say that in the West, I actually know from the ones that I know from behind the scenes, they don't really believe it. Like, they're trying to convince themselves of that. Forgiven, it's the opposite way. He just doesn't understand why we don't get it. Why do we not see that when he lost that game, he had to lose that game? Because he's almost like Idra in that sense, because he was actually playing in a superior way, and if the opponent had played in the correct way, he would have then won the game. So it's not his fault the opponent's worse than him. What is he supposed to do, Monty? Play worse himself, and therefore not express true excellence at all points in the game? And also, how could he go in at that point in the game? Because if he'd have died, the game's over. He just needed his teammates to perfectly play the situation out like this, as they should have done, and then he would have carried the whole game. So it's not his fault. It's unreal. Like, I almost wish, unfortunately you can't get these things, but I wish some of you people could see some of the explanations I've had as to how H2K lost games. It's like I've already said this before. It's like he was hypnotizing me. He would just start down this path of logic, and as I accepted each tiny premise, at the end I was like, no, you're right, actually. Everyone else in the whole game fucked up, including the players who beat you. You're the best player, and I just hope it all works out how you say next time. And yet, here's the sickest part of it, Zirene. I had sort of consigned myself to like I sort of quietly, you know, like in in Reddit where they just put like the tiny text. I'm almost like at the end, I'm like, but you did lose the game though. But now but now the sick thing is, it's actually worked out as well, and now you might be going like world semi. So
yeah,
that's so sick.
This theory would be completely proven true if they lose to Albus Nox, because Albus Nox do not play by the same rules, and he could totally just be like,
"Oh no, dude,
they're shitty. They were just not playing.
Dude, they are playing
right
fucking
way.
brand support. What is this? They're not fucking pro player. Like, just he'd go ham, wouldn't he? He'd just go absolutely ham on it. Like, no, but it is pretty good though. Yeah, what? It would not work. What the fuck are you doing? It's unreal. I love it. It's absolutely unreal. Okay, so time's come, Monty. You ready? I've saved it till the end. Dessert for last, mate. So,
well, give me 1 second. I gotta be right back. Real quick. 1 second. I apologize.
Okay, right. Assuming, let's see. The problem is we haven't got that much time. Should we just keep talking and wait till he comes back?
No, he'll be back in just a second. Okay. We don't have to. He needs to be in on all the jokes right from the start, Duncan.
Then let's talk about something separately, because assuming nothing goes on the mic, I don't want to have to edit this. So, as a sidebar, what sidebar should we talk about while we're waiting?
I don't really want any sidebars, but
I've got a question for you. Here's a question.
We've made our predictions.
This is a very simple one. It doesn't matter if Zirene answers or not. So, if you notice a trend in a bunch of the upsets of really weird games, the winning mid laner was on Ori and Sol, and yet for the tournament it doesn't have some godlike win rate. I think it's like won 4 games, lost 3. What logic is there as to why Ori and Sol, in the right circumstances, is just like some godlike champion? What is the logic behind that?
It's easy to get out of the laning phase, but most importantly is that it allows you to collapse very quickly on the side lanes, which messes up people's timings when they're pushing out without having a teleport. And he's a very safe champion. He gets extremely tanky with a couple of items and still puts out ridiculous amounts of damage during team fights. And he's good at team fighting, and he can also split push again without teleport. And he's very good at clearing waves, so you can you can manage your waves and control them really well. So he does a lot of things, and he does them very well.
Okay, that wasn't important, Zirene. That was like a tiny sidebar on Ori and Sol. So we're going to keep going here, mate. We haven't cut the VOD, so let's start now on Group D, okay? So here's the question we're going to start with in Group D. Let's just start with the Samsung stuff and get it out of the way initially, okay? So we've kind of touched on it before, but coming into Worlds, like, I don't think you can say just because they're Korean, like, oh yeah, Samsung obviously like 3rd best team in the tournament. No, there's obvious weaknesses they had and flaws, and areas where someone like TSM, for example, could have exploited them. Like, for example, if Samsung's this really great late game team, well, TSM, as far as I can tell, is one of the best early to mid game teams. I mean, this looked like it could be a good matchup. Why do you think Samsung ended up doing so well in the group, Zirene?
I feel like their drafts were good, but I feel like Ambition, he's always kind of been the guy that helps the team get off the ground. Him and Crown like really stepped up. And even though they're against like RNG, who's also one of the better early game teams in the tournament, or historically, they've been crush lane, win game. It's like Samsung, just their macro's really fucking good. 20 minutes, they're doing Baron. Like, these guys know how to close games out when they get a lead, and Ambition and Crown were getting in the leads that they needed early.
And Core JJ too. The thing is,
yes, that's true. That's true.
His Tom Kench is really good. Like, their mobility on the map with Tom Kench is exceptional with Core. They are very surprising about when they use Abyssal Voyage to cut you off, make effective dives, get picks. So I think that once TSM got red, and once the Lee Sin bans and stuff started coming in against Svensker, and they lost a lot of that early fire, and that Samsung, they did play a more early game focused style in the Gauntlet than we had seen from them typically, and I was a bit concerned that we weren't seeing that in week 1. And I think that they were too passive in week 1, and they really stepped up their aggression for week number 2, and that helped them out quite a bit.
I mean, if you look at the two bans that Samsung did in their second game against TSM, they banned Lee Sin and they banned Syndra, who were literally the two champions that Svenskeren and Bjergsen had their best games of the whole tournament on.
Yep. Well, Bjergsen's always been a really good Syndra player, so that wasn't too much of a surprise.
And I love this shit as well. Like, the blue side Aurelion Soul ban from Samsung. I think SKT did it as well against Athena or something like that. Baimi, the one who didn't play Aurelion Soul previously. It's like the Koreans don't fuck around. Like, they don't care if you've shown that you play Aurelion Soul or not. Like, they're just going to ban it regardless because they don't even want to take that risk. And I think that's really cool because they're respecting best
Except
of
for
ones.
Rox.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one. That was they knew that he played that shit too.
Yeah,
they
was
had
really
to have
bad.
known. But like Samsung and SKT, they're just like, fuck this champion. You're not gonna get it, even if you've got like 2 games on it ever. You're just not getting this shit, and that shows me that they really care about best of ones, and they really respect it.
Okay, before we wreck TSM, the game that they had against Splice from Bjergsen was pretty insane. But is okay? This is people are going to say this is like complaining. Isn't Syndra a bit ridiculous right now if it gets any kills?
Yes.
Like, isn't that like
is.
you hit one thing and you automatically get to use your whole kit and kill the person, and you can 100 to 0 someone from an ult.
Yeah, the buffs were pretty ridiculous. And also, what people aren't talking about is, yes, Syndra's very strong, but the other reason why Syndra is so strong right now is that, first off, Gragas was nerfed. And second off, all of the other early game junglers are getting banned out. And where Syndra is weakest is when you blow her summoners and you just repeatedly kill her in lane with an aggressive early game jungler. But in the absence, with the combination of jungle nerfs and the bans tendencies that we've seen from teams at Worlds, there are fewer opportunities to punish her when she's at her most vulnerable. And once she gets rolling, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and she's super easy to get rolling too. Like, I'm looking at the week 1 mid laners that people are playing. Almost everybody's playing Cassiopeia. There's a few Varises. There's like Orianna, Victor. She has the easiest gank assist pre-6 out of all mid laners right now. Like, she's the one who sets that up. You get an Elise Syndra, like, she's going to get a kill. They have to take cleanse. They don't get a second summoner spell. You get way more mobility than them. She's so oppressive. It's like how Faker completely boned Jensen in their first matchup. It's like, this champion's ridiculous. Even her counter, Vladimir, and I think that's what happened in the TSM Splice one. Yeah, they were okay with leaving Syndra up because they wanted to counter pick with Vladimir, but that's not a counter until like level 13, right? He has to get like Spirit Visage completed.
Yeah.
But even then, Bjergsen's like, I'm just gonna go to other lanes. Like, Senkux ends the game 2-1-1, and Bjergsen is 13-1. It's like the guy just went to other lanes. He's like, fuck this, shove you in, and he goes elsewhere and just kills the entire team.
I will add in the context. Obviously, he's one of the all-time great Syndra players. Like, you have to add that in. Like whenever you're talking about a champion being broken, you can't just look at like the best players and be like, they're fucking super sick on it. Yeah, that is their champion. But it did seem like,
I mean, historically,
it's not like it was only when he was on 12 kills that it was super mad and he could just instantly pick anyone with everything. You know.
I mean, historically, my 2 favorite champions to watch Bjergsen play are Syndra and Lissandra. I really like watching him on those 2 picks. I think he's really good. I mean, I think he's really good in general, but I think he has a unique style on those 2 picks that you don't see from a lot of other players.
You buy the storyline that, much like some other players here, I think Smeb, much like Name in the past, Bjergsen was ill. I think he had some sort of like cold or something, and that might have affected his performance?
He couldn't talk, so yes, I think that definitely affected TSM's performance.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if he got better in week 2, but I know in week 1, but they still ended 2-1 in that week. So
yeah, he didn't seem that sick in week 2, to be fair, except that Splice game. So and ironically won that game. So weird. So
they also had like that. Okay. That TSM Samsung game was really weird though, because TSM had opportunities to actually win that game, and first off, they didn't take them. And then the other one was like Doublelift just completely brain farted and walked straight into a Victor when they had a chance to go Baron. It's like TSM actually had ways to win that game.
I think Doublelift played that really poorly, and it was a bad decision to try and 1v1 that Victor, especially when the Victor's ult was still up, et cetera, et cetera. But the counter argument to that is that everybody's like, oh, if Doublelift didn't do that, they would have gotten the Baron. But the problem is
fucked everywhere else though. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that there were still 3 members of Samsung up, and there was still a Victor, a really fed Victor with an ultimate available. And if he walks up and Chaos storms inside the Baron pit while you're in there, like you could straight up like wipe the entire team. So they did actually have to deal with that Victor, and I don't think it was as clear cut as people were making it sound.
Yeah. I'd actually have to look at it again because I think Bjergsen's ultimate was at a point where it was like super low cooldown. So if they started to do Baron, he may have had it back by then because he had just used it on double lift.
It was
like,
down.
Like super fast though. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to see it again. But yeah.
Well, also that's another classic
right,
example. Yeah. Okay. What do you say?
I was just saying like they were getting destroyed across the map. Like double lift gets some early kills, but it's like Hauntzer's dying. Bjergsen gets solo killed by Crown. It's like it was a Clown fiesta, but like double lift was the one who had to save it.
Like, yeah, he was the one who was actually fed in that game. And the sad thing about that game, too, for TSM is, like, when you're playing the Zilean mid, okay, Bjergsen's not having a great game, but he's still on a champion where even if he just, like, has no money, he can still do shit because he's not expected to deal damage in the late game. He is there to provide utility. So he can have no gold and still have some effect on the game as opposed to other things where he would be having
and they had a Ken in top lane, so there's plenty of damage on the team.
Yes, Double Lift was really fed after the laning phase. And that entire composition, what was the goal? It was about providing crowd control for Double Lift to go fucking nuts in team fights. So they still had a chance to win, and Double Lift's positioning in those team fights did cost them on multiple occasions.
But you also can't use the like classic Western logic of like, just because one thing could have been done differently, we would have then made every correct decision, closed out the whole game, and therefore basically, like, come on, mate. Like, yeah, I agree, you would be in the game. It's not like, put it this way, people always get tilted that Monty brings up that example, where EDG played Fnatic in game 1 of the quarterfinals last year, and would literally have won the game if they just teleported and went to the base, right?
Yes.
The whole point of that is, that's game over. There's nothing else to be done. The other team can do nothing, and it's just game. Like, you can't do that when it's like, 7 other things must happen, including winning this fight, doing this. Like, oh, come on, mate. How many? Listen, unless you're amazing, you can only have like a couple of things in a game that go your way. You can't have, and this game, and then I would have won this game, and then I would have won this tiebreaker. You're like, all right, mate, calm down. So okay, that's sort of the good part, Monty. First things first, like we've got the Bjergsen one. Admittedly, he had a pretty shit game on Bjerg and Zilean in that game, but if we have to pick the first person to talk about on TSM who had problems, it has to be Double Lift, surely.
Yes.
He was one of the best players in the world before this tournament.
Okay,
fucking shit the bed.
We were discussing him as a potential MVP. It was either him or Bjergsen for the entire season of summer. He played very well. But there's just not excuses for the way he positioned, his failure to use flash. I mean, he got styled on in that first game by Mata's Alistar in situations that, yeah, it's hard to play if you're getting flanked by an Alistar, but he just refused to actually use his abilities or his summoner spells to get out of the way of the engages. And his laning wasn't great. The one game that I think he did well was the second game that we saw, or the game against Samsung, where he was actually getting the kills, but part of that was Ruler and Core JJ making tremendous errors, but he did get the kills. But even when he got the kills, he didn't convert them into really much of anything and continued to make positional and judgment mistakes in a lot of the team fights. Like, he didn't show up pretty much at all. That's why we have to discuss him for, like, the Dade Award, is because he was very hyped and playing very well and did basically nothing.
What do you think, Zirene?
I definitely think he did nothing, and I think that Biofrost has to be thrown in there as well. I know he wasn't hyped or anything like that for Dade Award.
You can give him a little bit of pass because he's a rookie, though, right? Compared to the others.
Yeah, I do give him a little bit of a pass on that, and I know that he was nervous at the Air Canada Center as well.
But I mean, it's a bit more egregious if you're Double, if all these seasons in, you've been in multiple worlds. Bjergsen's the same thing, right?
Yeah, but I definitely feel like the bottom lane in general just didn't perform up to the expectations that were set for them during the season.
That's one of the things that really tilted me, is that to this day, NA still hypes their bottom lanes. There's fucking no bottom lanes in NA. Shut up. Ever since Piglet went out of LCS, there's nothing. The idea that EU didn't have the better bot lanes this season, you're fucking god. What are you on about? What are you on about? They have nothing in NA. That's why I actually had Double Lift as my MVP, because I said, well, I mean, the delta between him and all the other AD carries was so huge Like it was, wasn't it? Like that's the difference. Bjork's a super sick. There's actually some decent mid laners in NA, Jensen, etc. Difference is, who the fuck are the other good AD carries in North America?
I think Sneaky's actually pretty good.
He's all right,
but then the drop off is like pretty drastic.
People also like to hype up Stixay because they only remember him playing Caitlyn.
Yeah. Stixay has like a weird fucking buff whenever he goes to an international tournament. Like I saw the guy back in Challenger on like CLG Black. Like he was not good back then, and then he was not really good during the CLG spring split. Yeah. And then like playoffs comes around, it's like, oh shit, there's this thing called Caitlyn, and he just wrecks everybody. He goes to MSI, and everybody's like, oh, he's the greatest AD carry that's ever walked the earth. Like he's getting all these fucking praises from foreign teams.
Yeah.
And then he like shits the bed again during summer, and then he comes back up in playoffs. Like I don't understand how this guy has such inconsistent performances.
Okay. I mean, if you're gonna, you might as well be clutch in the most important games, right?
Yeah, right.
Good quality to have.
He steps up when it matters. I will give him that.
So here's one of those areas that, like, this is just a classic fan thing that tilts me. It's like, okay, personally, I'm not a big fan of best of one round robin in this format. Like, I'm not a big fan. I don't really like it. I definitely don't like the idea that, like, basically you're going to set the whole bracket for the rest of the fucking tournament off a bunch of these games. And I hate that. I personally hate that tiebreaker. I don't like the idea that you just isolate the two teams in the tiebreaker and forget every other result. So it's like, oh, so if I somehow would 2-0'd the team that win the group, that doesn't get counted if within the tiebreaker. Like, I don't know.
Do you agree with TSM fans? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I already thought that years ago, mate. Like, I've actually complained about this many times in Counter-Strike. That's why I'm glad in Counter-Strike we don't use round robin, because this used to happen regularly. Like, you'd get a team that went out third in the group who actually had upset the winner of the group and a team that might win the tournament. Yeah. And that doesn't get counted some mad reason, just your games against this one opponent. It's like, I thought the whole point was we were in a group stage, mate, playing everyone. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I actually do agree with the TSM fans on that one. But the part I don't understand is people have no problem in all the other groups when it's a team they're not emotionally invested in being like, this is like a classic League of Legends thing. Well, this is the arbitrary rule set, therefore if you were good enough and deserved to, you would have won in the way that the arbitrary rule set allows you to win, and if you lost, that means God and the universe and the fate was telling you you are not good enough, so accept your loss, you were not good enough. But then, whenever it's TSM or someone like that who goes out in a scenario like this, oh, it's so unfair, like group stage is bullshit, like, oh, what if they've played a best of 5 against that team, they'd have won, like, you know, like, come on man, you got to accept it. It's like, you've got to be consistent whichever way you go with it, right? You know?
Yeah, and like I personally always think more games is better, even for like stakes and stuff like that. Like I would love to see a tiebreaker played between RNG and TSM. I don't care that TSM lost 2 times to RNG. RNG never beat Samsung.
Yep, exactly.
In a single game, and TSM beat them once. It's like, all right. I know that it's like, oh well, maybe they just actually counter TSM, but how much is that going to matter? When you make it out, I just want to see who the better team is.
And the key detail here to add in is that the reason why in Counter-Strike we didn't used to have a tiebreaker like that, a played game, is because we used to do 3-day tournaments or 2-day tournaments, so there wasn't actually time to play another game. The difference is, what I love about Worlds actually, is that you do have time for a real tiebreaker if you need one. You actually have the opportunity and the time to do that, and then it just, at that point there can't be any argument. Like, by the way, every fan who was like, yes, but then it's like RNG would have won a best of 3 against TSM but lost. They're not playing TSM, they're in a fucking group against the field. Do you understand this concept? In a double elim tournament, you can lose to someone in the first round and win the whole tournament through the lower bracket. They don't then go up, bonus round, you must play them again now to see if you have won the overall. Like, it doesn't matter, does it? You play the field, not the opponent, for fuck's sake. It's not a hard concept.
Yeah, I think that maybe so moving to a best of 3 format does eliminate a lot of these problems, because I mean I made a vlog about it and talked about it earlier, but I think that the tiebreaker format for the NA LCS was stupid, and it actually made it so that Apex didn't go to playoffs and Envious did, even though the match score was better for the game differential, and I think that's like the first tiebreaker. Yeah, and like just because you have a head-to-head record, I think if you're running a league which has round robins where you're playing everybody, the first thing that matters is your performance against the entire field, because that is what you're judging in a round robin, like you say. And it's not a playoff bracket where you are judging a performance against a single opponent. So head-to-head record should only be considered if match differential is the same. And that's a way to solve it at Worlds. Move to best of 3, then you can have the match differential, then to head-to-head record, right? And it makes tiebreakers... I mean, tiebreakers almost always will not happen in that situation.
Okay.
There will not be games played. You just have more data, a larger game set to work with, and you're actually reflecting the nature that these leagues compete in these days, right? Because nobody's even playing best of ones anymore.
Yep.
I have a really sick predilection, Monty, a love for poetic justice. Okay, I just love it. I love it when people set themselves up and then literally, like the hubris where they are just hoisted on their own petard. That's literally what wrecks them. So even if, Monty, okay, maybe you've worked with this guy Weldon Green, you don't have the same issues, you don't have the same necessarily dislike of him that I do, but there has to be a certain level of humor in the idea that someone who literally markets themselves, it's even in the Twitter header, on being someone who's an expert in mental resilience, has now taken 2 number 1 NA seeds to Worlds in groups they should have been able to get out of, and they've both failed in the group stage and in epic collapses towards the end of the group. There has to be some level of humor when you are billing yourself as I train mental resilience. That is unbelievable. that is pretty nuts, right? I didn't make reality happen. I remember that. I'm not the architect of the whole world. That just happened. I didn't choose it to.
I don't know if CLG actually took him to Worlds.
I don't think they did. I think they left him after the playoffs.
Yeah.
But to be fair, you're teaching people these lessons. Some of them should stick. It's not like there's a delayed effect. You've been out of my presence for 10 hours. Now the effect is fading. Unless maybe. Mate, I've got it. You've cracked it again, Zirene. You're on point, mate. What he's done is, he's like Apple. Those little iPod headphones? They always break after 3 months. He's built in his own, what's that term, Monty, where you purposely build a light bulb or something so it has to break at a certain point, or a car?
Planned obsolescence.
Yeah, he's built in planned obsolescence. So if you don't keep up regular doses of Weldon, then actually, what's the opposite? You get less resilient. You get mentally broken down. And then he's like, well, what could top that up? Some fat stacks in Daddy Weldon's bank account, then I could teach you again how to believe in yourselves.
The mental breakdown, I think, was really real for TSM.
Oh, yeah.
I expected them to get out of the groups. I expected Samsung to be first in that group, but I did expect TSM to take second. I also think that one of TSM's big problems was the one that I was stating the entire season, which is that it was very difficult to tell how good they were because they were crushing everybody so convincingly that we never got to see many instances of them going into a very late game situation where they had to make decisions. And I think we saw that they really did not make great decisions in the mid and late game when they were even or behind.
Monty, do you remember the one that tilted me a lot? Is every time everyone kept saying, Doublelift's a shot caller now. Now he has none of those problems of ever doing weird moves and making decision making errors. Yeah, well, I guess you won on that one in the end, guys. Fuck me, what was I thinking? That people tend to Tiger still has his stripes, doesn't he, motherfucker? Come on, mate. Come on. Okay, Zirene, come on. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that TSM, they were always they win fast or they lose fast, and that was their thing. Everybody was supposed to feel empowered to make plays, and that's not what I saw on that last day. I saw Hansard being afraid to even pull the trigger on some things. Yep. I saw that Doublelift and the rest of them. It was really actually quite bad. I feel like that everything kind of went out the window, and I think a big tell as well is they forgot to shake hands afterwards with Samsung. That's the thing as well, though.
Did they forget to shake hands?
They said that they did, but that's the thing is regardless of whether or not they did.
Here's something weird about that.
Go ahead.
Here's something weird about that. Now, the Korean teams do not shake hands after a match, right? They're in booths. That doesn't really happen in Korea, and yet Samsung managed to remember how to shake hands on a stage that is styled like the LCS, and somehow in 18 best of threes over the last season, didn't seem to be an issue.
You don't shake hands after game one.
It's a weird one.
Oh, that's by the way,
okay, that's a good point.
By the way,
so anyway, what were you going to say about it? I just find it suspect. That's all.
From my experience, by the way, I'm not joking. I've interviewed many Koreans over my esports career. Okay, I'm not joking. Unless they've had a lot of experience with the West, they are confused when you put your hand out to give them a handshake. They don't know what it means at first, and usually they sort of it takes them 10 seconds to realize. And often they give you a handshake in a way where they're not really comfortable with it, because obviously it's a different type of human contact than you're necessarily having at all times. So again, you can't just, like apply Western values. Like good sportsmanship is to do exactly this movement with your hand. Like, come on, mate, that's not universal, is it? You don't come out the womb shaking hands. Well, I mean, that's like sort of almost a mad reference to a joke there, but I won't go there. So, yes, I mean, what was your point?
Yeah, I think we teach him to go across the stage and shake hands and like, for camera angles and stuff like that. It's like after you win, walk across and shake hands.
Okay.
But yeah, like if they forgot, then that's like a big tell for me that they were not mentally in the right place. And if they decided not to, like that's even a bigger thing where it's like, why the fuck would you do that? So regardless of which one it was, I still feel like that day TSM mentally collapsed in many different ways.
Monty, did you like that tweet where I subtly referenced that by saying that RNG, has anyone got the video where they rushed backstage because they'd forgotten to fully zip TSM's Bodybag all the way up? Every now and then, they come to you.
Did you like Forgiven's tweet where he was talking about the players being at
good,
4 a.m. The night before their matches?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Crepo didn't come so strong with his reply there. Yeah, but then wasn't Forgiven out that late? Yeah, mate, they don't play on the same day. Good point.
He was already done.
Well done. Good point. Yep.
Secured his first place.
You win this one, Christo. I'll be back. Like, come on, mate. Come on. You didn't think that one through. Okay, here's a topic we have to talk about if we're talking about mental breakdowns and people like being uncharacteristically. One thing that people in the West have now taken from Koreans that was a negative aspect of their culture that I do not like is this notion that when you lose, you must fucking wear sackcloth and fucking flagellate yourselves and go in front of the public like, I have sinned and betrayed all of your trust and your faith. I'm so sorry. I am a worthless piece of shit who deserves nothing in life. And if you can even not spit in my face, Lord Fan, then I would please be so grateful, and I promise next time. Come on, mate. You are just a really sick player who had one bad tournament. That's allowed, And also, yeah, come on.
Didn't SKT even apologize for winning when they said that they weren't strong?
Probably.
It's like,
yeah,
what?
It's mad, isn't it? That's an aspect that I don't like about their culture,
And people wouldn't have these apocalyptic reactions and negative backlash against the team if there were simply more international tournaments every year. Yep. If there weren't 6 games in groups, 6 games that could ruin your entire fucking year, maybe this wouldn't happen. Just saying.
No, that's the problem, mate, because for example, in CSGO, in the last, let me think when the first one was. So we've now just reached 3 years of having majors, and majors are basically our world championship, right? Except we don't have one that's called the world championship. We just have 3 majors a year, roughly, right? And in those 3 years, we've had 9. So it has averaged out to 3 a year, 3 like a 12-month span, okay? So the whole point is, if you're the best player in the world, so let's say you are let's just say the best jungler, okay? Say you are like Clearlove. The difference is, if you fail at 9 of those motherfuckers in 3 years, you probably weren't very good, actually. That probably is a good average, pretty good data set, and you probably at that point are shit. But the problem is, as much as we're laughing at Clearlove now, it has only been 3 worlds he's been to. Let me think, actually. No, it's 4 now, actually. Is it 4? 2? Yeah, it's still only 4. It's still only 4 LAN tournaments he's done particularly bad at some point. And by the way, not even that bad necessarily.
He also won MSI.
MSI.
Sure, there's that as well.
They won that, though.
Yeah, they won.
You know what I mean? The big problem there is, in League especially, it's not even guaranteed you go to every Worlds. That's the biggest problem. So the problem is you really do see certain people's careers. Like for example, say Doublelift retires tomorrow. People now will just do a 180 and say that, because he ended on a shit note, he was never that good. Well, obviously that's ridiculous, isn't it? He was a fantastic player. And by the way, he was very good at international competition for most of his competition, except those 2 worlds pretty much.
Yep. I don't know. But I think that it's not just the esports or the League of Legends that's doing this. I think it's it's the fact that
it's the fan culture and how much pressure there is on you and how many eyes there is on you and all that sort of shit.
Yeah, and it's the pressure that exists around Worlds being basically the only really big international tournament, right? So.
Okay. Was there anything else we need to talk about TSM getting wrecked?
I think it is. I just think it's. I feel bad for the players because I really like Bjergsen, and I think it sucks to have the reaction that the fans have in attacking the players. But at the same time, It is fucking hilarious to watch them lose.
It's also allowed
And
to
the
make
only-
jokes,
only-
Monty, even if horrible things
Yes.
happen to someone who wouldn't enjoy the joke. Come on.
The only reason, and I said this on Twitter, the only reason people think it's so fucking funny is because the TSM fan base is composed of a ton of assholes. And like the way that they approach social media, and I think that I will fault the team for encouraging this behavior in their fans because they have, perhaps not intentionally, but they have done nothing to stop the breeding of their obnoxious fan base and their obnoxious tendencies, such as chanting TSM at events when people aren't even there. I've never seen TSM come out on social media or say something like, hey guys, how about being respectful to the teams that are actually playing at this tournament and stop chanting TSM? No, they just let it go. They think it's a fucking hilarious joke, et cetera, et cetera. So the way that the team has handled its own fan base has been disrespectful and immature, and that has caused this like runaway locomotive to get where it is right now, where everybody then, there's a cat jumping on me, everyone right now thinks that it's absolutely just hilarious when they lose. And you know what? It is.
There's also a dual factor as well, Monty, which is that it's not just that TSM fans are obnoxious, but somehow they simultaneously are obnoxious while constantly preaching that they are the most persecuted group in all of esports. Everyone hates them, everyone fucks with them, and everyone makes jokes about them. At the same time, they are the worst offenders, and they then claim themselves that, like, basically they're the ones who do the least and everyone's just bullying them. Like, I wonder why everyone loves seeing your team get fucking bodied.
Also, it's the way that they behave too on social media, because the TSM fans are very aggressive in the way they attack other teams and players. Like, for example, when I look at Cloud9's fan base, I don't really see them going out of their way to like shit on other people. Cloud9, as far as I can tell, most Cloud9 fans just like to like laugh at their own team's memes. Like they like to go, haha, top die, and like, welcome to my butthole. Like they're just all about like, you know, enjoying their players' personalities. They're not about going out and like trying to wreck other players or other teams' fan bases. Like you just don't see that. Like this is, and CLG, they're mostly just beaten down, but they also don't go around and like attack. In fact, CLG supports their team probably to a degree that is kind of unreasonable in the way that they defend guys like Huhi. Like that's kind of weird, but
and also the thing about the jokes, by the way,
I just
Monty.
I just see much more active like brigading and attacks from the TSM fans against other teams and other people, right? And I got fucking death threats. I predicted TSM to get out of that group. I predicted them to win against Royal in the last game of the day, and people were sending me death threats on social media. What the fuck is that?
Here's the thing, Monty.
I like TSM as a team, but your fan base is shit.
I'm absolutely fine with people, by the way, making jokes about Perks. I also think it's funny, by the way, that Perks is, I know he was a quite cocky player coming to LCS and has failed twice internationally. That's fine. But here's the thing. By the way, I wouldn't obviously agree with people like kill yourself, never play League of Legends. That's obviously going too far. It's not funny at that point in time. Yeah. But here's the thing. I think it's fine to make jokes, etc. And if I was Perks, I'd say just stay off social media for 2 weeks, mate. Don't read it. Like, there's nothing for you to read there. But the level of hypocrisy that it's fine to ridicule a rookie at his first ever Worlds as though like he should never play. He should never play League again, by the way. But if you say that Bjergsen or Double have shit the bed, then somehow like, oh, be respectful, please, guys. Don't do like the same people we're talking about here for fuck's sake as well. Come on. Every time a TSM fan ever posts, by the way, like a victim mentality, just click their post history. Every time without fail, you're going to see gold in there, mate. You're going to see gold.
Like the thing about it is that people were saying, you know, I made a video saying the TSM sacrificed a lot, and I think they went the extra mile, and I think other Western teams should follow this model and try and emulate what TSM did.
I think they went too far, Monty.
Yep. All right, whatever.
Like I think that made more pressure on them. I think the fact that they gave everything up and fucking 1 million hours a day and we never have any time off. Guess what? I don't think that's healthy for a person's brain. Then when you fail, you're going to be destroyed, aren't you, mate?
Yeah, and that certainly didn't help. But I do think that
I agree that it's admirable that they tried to do everything. I agree on that part. Sure.
I do. So anyway, that's why I made that video, and people were like, "Well, why were you making all those like joke tweets and stuff like that?" And about TSM, I'm like, because I like the players. I just don't like you idiots on social media, and I think it's funny to mock you.
Why are you making jokes on your personal Twitter account? That shouldn't be allowed. what if a player was to see that, or a child, or maybe a dog through a mirror in a Volkswagen? Like, shut the fuck up, mate. It's my personal Twitter. Are you out your mind? Also, I love the logic, by the way, Monty. You and Monty just fucking hate Double if what the same player that all TSM fans told us for like 3 years we should shut the fuck up saying's good because we're all biased in favour of him because Monty used to be his coach for like a year or something. Brilliant. So now magically we hate him. Soon as he put that TSM jersey on, mate, I wanted him dead. I wanted him fucking hung, drawn, and quartered. Yeah, obviously, brilliant, isn't it? We're only saying he's like the MVP on this fucking show. Brilliant, as usual. Like, that's the thing, okay? Just as a closing note on the whole TSM issue, I'm just going to put this out there, okay? A lot of people who are fans now obviously weren't there in the early days, even of this show, which began in like early 2014. No joke. There's nothing behind the scenes. The only reason TSM fans, TSM players and the org, which by the way engendered a lot of the like people who disliked us, the only reason they initially got butthurt, no joke, is because in a season where at the end of the season, Cloud9 won the regular split and then won the playoffs, we said Cloud9 is the best NA team, not TSM. That's it. That's the whole genesis of the whole beef, is us saying TSM was second best team. By the way, we were proven right. That's it. That's the whole thing right there. And that's what all of this for years has been about, is that we didn't just bow down and say like TSM's the best. Why? Because TSM. Brilliant. Like, I think I've solved the TSM equation there, mate. I've resolved it. It's over. Okay. Any parting words for this episode, Zirene?
Oh, man.
Because Monty has to go at some point, so we got to wrap this thing.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah. Don't want to like be like a Hanser apologist or anything, but I also think that he played really poorly in that top lane in TSM.
Who could have predicted that when he went up against
it's weird, yeah, wait a minute.
A former world champion
wait a minute.
And a guy with significantly more experience and who's performed actually quite well in a much stronger region with much stronger top laners and who was busy solo killing Someday during the playoffs, who could have predicted that Hanser would not look good on it? It was me. I predicted.
See, the thing is, Zirene, I remember this twit longer you wrote where you basically like used math, and at the end it was like QED, Hanser is the best top laner in the West, and basically sort of a carry.
No, I didn't say West. I said NA.
Oh, NA, my bad. I mean, obviously people like Wonder, and they're
fine.
fantastic.
And you know what? I didn't disagree. I thought it was a good post, Zirene, and I didn't disagree with you. But there's a difference between what he can do in NA and what he can do against Looper.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree, and that's why I'm like, I'm not like gonna defend people. I don't think they're doing well.
We're not saying that he was gonna be a world beater, but it was a pretty, especially in this group, it was a point of weakness for TSM.
Well, here's the thing, Zirene. Hanser is a perfect point to just make like a quick analogy about like the problem with how the TSM fan base reacts to things. So you'll never find an episode of Summoning Insight while Hanser was on TSM in the summer split where Thorin, who's quite known, by the way, for even saying things with a level of hyperbole, who says, like, Hanser is shit, Hanser is way worse than Huni, Hanser's, like, not even a top 3 top lane, Hanser, like, because he can't carry, he's a worthless player, he should never even be considered. Even though I've said a lot of ridiculous things, by the way, some things that I don't even mean, never said anything vaguely approaching that. But it is treated as though because I say, personally, by my criteria, I would value Huni as the best top laner, but I can see the argument for him as that's treated as like, I actually think Hanser should like uninstall League of Legends right now and go and play fucking like My Little Pony Adventure Time. Like, that's the level of how the fans react. Like, if you don't like the thing I like, you literally want it destroyed. Like, no, that's actually you projecting your mentality, guys, not the way I think of the game. Like, by the way, even after Worlds, still think Hanser's a pretty good player. Problem is, he's not the carry of his team. I don't think that's his job. And personally, I like top laners to be carries. So I give credit to carries.
That's totally what, like, when I started writing that, I was like, you put a lot of weight on somebody being a star and, like, being able to carry. Like, that's why Flame is, like, your fucking Bay, right? Sure. Because, what? Yeah, because you love when top laners can carry and when they can actually go off. I totally get that.
And remember, this is why I made the analogy, by the way, that Hanser is the Looper of NA, basically. Because look at their teams. Super stacked, all the positions. People say all the players are the best at all the positions. The carries are mainly in the other lanes. But who would say that Looper historically is a better player than Flame? I don't really know many people now that their careers have ended, But that was the debate made at the time. People used to say, his team wins, and you know what? That's what you need from a top laner now, is to teleport. Which is all great, by the way. But sometimes that's because teams need role players. So how can you simultaneously be the role player and the carry and the best player? Like, you can't. So someone has to give someone up, mate. Everyone can't be the carry in every lane. So I still think it's fine if you want to use that criteria that I think the best is the one who did his job for this position. That's okay. That's another line of logic. The point is, like, if people say as much ridiculous shit as I do, you don't really need to like purposely interpret inferences into things that I didn't say. Why not just stick with all the things I did say? There's a lot of good shit out there. You can make a pretty good compilation video, right? You don't really need to like look for secret code. Like, that's one thing. Maybe that'll be my closing note, Monty. I'm someone where I am constantly criticized for like being too much hyperbole, making too many outrageous statements, and yet the biggest issues are always people like, but you see what he meant by this like seemingly innocuous statement was a secret code that only TSM fans with their decoder ring will be able to bring out. And when he said Hauntzer is good, he meant shit. And when he said that Hauntzer is a valuable player, he meant valuable in the dumpster. Like there's like the maddest level of inference you could ever get to. So that's fine. Like, I'm pretty sure you can just stick with what I actually said. Okay. So on that note, final comment, Zirene.
Oh man, like, I'm actually really excited to see what happens with these quarterfinals. Like, just looking ahead a little bit, because I don't know. These Chinese teams are so fucking random. Like, they won't top their group, but they'll like lose to the fucking bottom team in their group, like INTZ or even Splice.
Oh yeah, as a final note, Zion, let's add that in as well. So the same people. Okay, I agree. I thought I don't like the tiebreaker thing, but let's just add this in. That's not the thing that you ultimately complain about. Like, they didn't get the tiebreaker. Remember, there would never even be a tiebreaker scenario if Splice didn't help you and beat RNG. Shut the fuck up. If you want things to go the way they should go, shut the fuck up. You got as much help as you could get. Splice, the 3rd seed from Europe. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, keep going.
But,
you triggered me a bit there, mate. So.
Like, I think that there is potential for upsets from the Chinese teams, but I still think that the Korean teams are going to take it, and I don't know what's going to happen. Okay. I don't know. Like, I can just go with like, number 1 seeds are going to win, and then Korea is just going to close it out. But there's still potential for upsets, so I'm excited. I didn't actually think I was excited at first when I saw it. I was like, oh, this really sucks. Like, the left side is so stacked. Like, we're going to have our finals and the semis, but the more I think about it, the more I look at it, I'm like, what happens if like H2K actually go off? Like, what happens if Samsung is actually really fucking good?
Yeah, you better hope H2K goes off, but I'm still not very excited for this bracket. It's kind of
Monty, I've got the bright side for you, mate. This is the bright side you haven't thought of. Are you ready? This can be the first Worlds where all the Korean teams are in the semis.
I know, isn't that great?
See, there's a bright side. We can have the final Korean and 3 out of 4 Koreans in the semis. And then all I need you to do, mate, you ready? You got to have your tweets primed, okay? You just do a tweet like, boy, it sure would be good if on the desk right now they had the most experienced Korean analyst in the history of the World Championships.
What are you talking about? Papa Smith is going to be there.
True, yeah he's going to be there.
The most experienced.
At least we got Papa.
Okay, yeah. So, okay.
Hashtag at least we got Papa.
So Papa's got a brand new bag, TSM's Bodybag. So on that note, that's the end of the show. Thank you everyone for appearing. And I think Papa's got a brand new Bodybag, by the way, is going to be the subtitle. That's the end.